All right, let's go ahead and get started. I will call the meeting order. I may at some point. All right, so let's have a roll call, please.
Mayor Dexter?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Carr?
Here.
Councilmember French?
Here.
Councilmember McCon?
Here.
Councilmember Myers?
Present.
Councilmember Trello Warren?
Here.
Councilmember Sykes?
Here.
Manager West?
Present.
Attorney Ford?
Here.
All right, and if we can rise to the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you all for being here tonight. We are going to start with a proclamation. So let me go grab that in the microphone. All right, we wanted to take a minute tonight to, before we start our meeting, to recognize the great work of the Port Angeles Chamber of Commerce with the Winter Ice Village. So whoever wants to come down to represent the chamber this evening is welcome to join us up here.
Whole team.
Come on down. All right. So I'm going to read the proclamation, and then if anyone from the chamber wants to say something, then we'll let them do that. So, proclamation in recognition of the Port Angeles Chamber of Commerce Winter Ice Village. Whereas the City Council and City staff wish to recognize the contributions made to the community through the Port Angeles Chamber of Commerce Winter Ice Village. We wish to recognize those who dedicated their time to taking on the huge task of running a 7-day-a-week, 12-hour-a-day operation beginning November 22nd, 2019 through January 20th, 2020, providing a fun activity for children and adults. And whereas the Winter Ice Village is truly a community event, a great gathering place during winter months, a skate camp allowed the opportunity for loved ones to join in the fun from far away. And whereas acknowledging Mark Asher, Leslie Kidwell Robinson, and the Chamber Board for their work to put this event together, and Iris Winslow and Cynthia Warren as the Rink's operations manager, your organization and dedication helped keep the rink functioning even after the tent was brought down from heavy snowfall. And whereas it took 905 4-hour shifts, 240 volunteers for a total of 3,620 volunteer hours, 85,000 lights, and over 7,500 cups of hot chocolate to keep the skate rink open. And whereas we wish to offer our heartfelt thanks to those who helped support the community event through their selfless contributions, especially the faithful volunteers. The community came together once again to assist after the collapse of the tent. 150 people arrived to help throw the snow, proving how much the community valued the ice rink and extending the family fun. And whereas, through community partnerships and volunteers, combined with their continued efforts, which allow groups like the Port Angeles Chamber of Commerce to make a difference, volunteers are a large part of what makes Port Angeles a great place to live, work, and play. Now, therefore, I, Kate Dexter, Mayor, on behalf of the City Council of Port Angeles, and Nathan West, City Manager, on behalf of the staff of the City of Port Angeles, do hereby recognize the contributions made by the volunteers and Chamber staff for their support of the Winter Ice Village. We wish to thank you for your continued support. The community looks forward to another season of skating and hot chocolate with whipped cream and sprinkles. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Dexter. Thank you, City Manager Nathan West. Appreciate it very much. We have some of our team here, and there are a lot of people not named in the proclamation, a lot of organizations. You just simply we'd be here all night if Mayor Dexter was going to try to recognize everyone. So, but it really does take a village to build a village. And I'm glad the word fun was in there because that really what it is all about. The motivation behind this was really originally to create a reason for citizens to come into downtown Port Angeles in the wintertime. And I think we've accomplished that mission. There were a lot of other things we were trying to do, but that was the main original impetus for getting this going. Now it's also becoming a community tradition. I think when we do the third year, then this officially could be a tradition. And we are already planning for next year. In fact, we just came from a planning meeting for next year and are hoping for more of the great support that we got from city staff and from the city council. Collin County lodging tax funds helped us out quite a bit. The Elwha tribe, the Jamestown tribe. I'm not going to start because if I start, I got to go down to all of them. But really, just an amazing number of organizations, businesses, and individuals who have donated to make this happen. I want to thank our team that's here. That we do have a small group of the total 905 shift, 240 volunteers. But you did mention the proclamation, Cynthia Ward and Iris Winslow, who were there the whole 8 weeks. We had Edna Peterson and Jim Hagwood, who helped out quite a bit with the fundraising and actually reaching out to the community. So they did that pretty much the whole year. And so appreciate that work, very successful. We had Carol Sitton, and on the other side of Iris is Leslie. They were our first week rink managers, and also we're rink managers kind of in waiting the entire 8 weeks, so thanks for that. Tim Tucker, another rink manager, also on our board of directors. Thank you, Tim. Of course, we have on the side Nathan, our president of the board of directors, Christopher Thompson, who was a rink manager this last season. And on the end, those two guys down there. So, Paul Beck, who's the Iceman, and really caretaker of that ice to make sure it's great every morning. And every morning when Paul was there, like clockwork, and we really appreciate all the extra work, Paul. And then the Golden Hammer, Award went to Steve Vargas. Both those guys, by the way, not only did they do all that, but they were also rink managers during the season too. Rink manager serves for a week, just so you know. But anyway, it's kind of complicated, and we don't have time for all that. And I wish I could thank more people, but really, just a great season. We're happy to do it, and we do it for the community. So, thank you.
Thank you. Glad we could honor you this evening. And we have a lot of important business on our agenda tonight, but we wanted to get started with a really quick break for some hot chocolate with whipped cream and sprinkles. So we're going to take about a 10-minute break, and we'll get started again at 6:25. Before we get started, I just want to note on the agenda, we have I-1, which is the Community Paramedicine Grant Acceptance, and I-2, which is the Climate Action Planning Update. Then what I'd like to do is move J1, which is the OAC Services for Engineering Professional Services Agreement, up to just after the Climate Action Plan, because I think we have people in the audience who are here for all three of those things. And then we can, we'll go through the consent agenda and all of that first, but when we'll get to those, we'll just move that up. And we will either take a break after the Climate Action Plan or after the AOC services, depending on how long the Climate Action Plan takes for your planning purposes. All right, so let's get started with public comment. I have quite a few people signed up this evening, or we have quite a few people signed up this evening. Thank you. And we'll start with David Clark. While you make your way down, I'll just remind people that we ask that you state whether or not you're a resident of Port Angeles or a business owner, and ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes, please. And the light on the box will tell you when your time is coming to an end. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to make in your defense, I asked for a city marker the other day and I got it back in 2 hours. So there you go. There you go. I'm Dave Clark at 1214 South N Street. We've been here about 10 months. At that point, I was working for ONC, and I decided I was too busy, so I went ahead and cut back to part-time. And in that space, started staying home a little bit more and realizing that N Street is really crazy as far as traffic is concerned. Okay, and so then I contacted the city council. Sissy Brook was still around. She emailed me that day and said, I'm out of here, but here are some folks that you can talk to. Okay, so consequently I talked to Lindsay, and then Lindsay gave me Jonathan Bebby, I think is his name, email. We contacted each other, and he gave me a lengthy email, and I just want to read a couple quotes. Since at least 1999, N Street has been classified as a collector arterial, and therefore is intended for heavy traffic. Okay, 1999. In my opinion, he says that two key elements lead to reduction in traffic: speed, police enforcement, and road design. So what happened, I became a car counter. Okay, that's my hobby. Isn't that sad? Anyway, so you look at the high end, per hour, 200 vehicles. Plus or minus maybe a little bit. Low end, maybe 100 vehicles an hour that drive the arterial. Okay, that goes from, if you think off of Marine uphill on the 4th, those homes with the beautiful views out there. So that feeder then goes all the way up 9th or N Street to 18th. Okay, so it's not so much the vehicles, but it's the speed. And it's not only the speed, but it's the speed at night. And it's sort of like the attitude of little kids, when they put their hands over their face. Nobody can see me. The same thing with folks driving at night. They don't feel that anybody's seeing them. So the speed's almost double. So let me quickly go through the speed limits there. Top of hill onto 4th. So going uphill is 25, top of hill is 15. Or let's see, 25, 20, then it goes to 15 on Crown Park. Quarter mile after that goes to 25, and then it goes on up to 20. So in the medical field, it's compassion fatigue. I wonder if in driving, it's looking at speed limit fatigue. So benefit of the doubt. Anyway, I'm almost out of time here. I've got a petition that I've worked out, had 80 people sign it. Let me just go through that, and then I'll get out of here. Petition to the City of Port Angeles regarding excessive speeding in the West 4th Street connector linking N Street and terminating south at 18th. The traffic corridor is mainly fed from Marine Drive to Hill Street, as well as 8th and 10th Streets coming west. The undersigned would like to enter a request to the city to begin a process of traffic mitigation by increasing police presence along this corridor, outlined above, which sees continuous disregard for the posted speed limits, 25 and 20 respectively, often attaining speeds in excess of 200% of legal limits. Realizing this route is the main feed of the Port Angeles PUD, PA Airport, municipal waste facility, and other businesses, traffic patterns often exceed 200 vehicles per hour throughout the day. Historically, non-enforcement has created both an increasing speeding nuisance and a quality of life problem due to excessive noise limits experienced on a constant basis. So anyway, I've got 80 folks that signed this petition, and I'm ready to start a conversation.
If you want to turn that into the city clerk so it can become part of the record, that would be great.
Okay, all right. I had a bunch more, but thanks for listening.
Thank you. All right, next on our list is Ed Chad.
Go get him, man.
I'm all wrapped up by the hot chocolate. I'm Ed Chad. I live in Port Angeles. And I have some comments as one of your would-be citizen volunteers for your climate planning. So I have a few principles I'd like to kind of throw out there for us to consider as you deliberate the best way to move forward. First, of course, we want to move as swiftly as possible. We understand that there may be some things that may pause the swiftness, but we still want to act within whatever needs to pause as swiftly as we can. We, of course, want to do everything as a city in a way that's transparent and invites public participation. And I know that you just have watched the second of your two little seminars on open public meetings and public records. We want to capitalize on the great interest of great volunteers that you brought out. And we want to solidify partnerships, particularly with Clallam County as we move forward. So I see a tension between wanting to move fast as we can, because we've got a big problem looming out there. And I wonder the extent to which collapses of the canopy over the ice rink are going to get worse as perturbations in the polar vortex get worse. Anyway, that's an aside. And we have an interest in moving forward with deliberation and with openness and with transparency. And there's a certain amount of tension between moving fast and moving carefully. So I've been thinking over my own work that I did with Clallam County with the Stream Keepers program, which I coordinated for 20 years, trying to think of an analogy on this. And certainly a huge amount of volunteer work got done without being an official open public meeting. And so I think there's a way to do this, and I think you're all collectively smart enough to figure out a way to craft that. So as an example, Stream Keepers would develop new sampling plans, for example, in a way that was open to the public. We had a way of recording what happened, but individual groups of people could work up proposals on their own and bring them to this forum. And then once the sampling plan was determined, then groups of volunteers would go out and, Lindsay, you were part of some of those teams. You didn't have to have the team going out on Ennis Creek to dig bugs be an open public meeting. So I think there's a way to do it. I'm not exactly sure how, but I know you've got a huge amount of expertise here. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next is John Ralston.
Hi, John Ralston, city resident. Not knowing if there's going to be an open conversation on item G1, I want to make sure that I publicly said that you 100% agree with the recommendations and the ordinance, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Lisa Huff.
Well, good evening, Ms. Megan. I'm Lisa Huff, and yes, I am a city resident. I'm here once again just asking for help for the homeless. I know that they put a big fence up so you can't go down behind the bell in the parking lot anymore. They have been coming and throwing themselves the stage down by the pier. They watch us on the pier. They have camps that are not in the public view. They will come along and take them to the dump. All we're asking is a place to be away from the public where they're not disgusted by us, where we can be out of the weather, we're not bothering people. That's all we're asking for. I don't think it's too much to ask. Just give us a place where we can be, where we're not going to be harassed by the police, we're not going to be bothered by people going by screaming horrible things at us. That's all we're asking for. It's not a whole lot. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mindy Geller.
Hello, Mindy Gelder, resident business owner. First of all, I'm so happy to see this council. I want to thank you all for everything you're doing and all the hard work. And I do want to voice my support for the ICLEI, the greenhouse gas inventory, for that moving forward, for volunteers being able to get what they need to move forward, and highly support that, because every day we waste another 10,000 metric tons of CO2 is going into the air, and I love that our city has signed on to be a climate change leader and to work on cleaning our own air first, so that's awesome. We also, in conjunction, A very simple thing I'm requesting is that downtown begin to actually have some recycling bins put up. We are creating some events for Earth Week this year. So I don't know if you all know, but Earth Day is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. And so it's going to be an entire week of events. And I emailed you all about that. So hopefully you can come up with some of your own things. But one of the things that would be awesome, we are going to have a rally on downtown on April 24th for Earth Day. And if the city would like to reveal or unveil some recycling bins at that rally, that would be perfect timing. And so I'm offering you that possibility and asking that that be done. So happy to help too. Thanks.
Thank you. Christy Cox.
Hi, good afternoon. I don't live in the city, but I do all of my business here. I am a co-owner and farmer at Sister Land Farms. We hold a booth at the farmers market every week, and the majority of our customers do live in the city, so we heavily service the city of Port Angeles. I've also been a volunteer on this climate planning group in several different capacities, and I just wanted to kind of speak to that topic tonight. And remind you again, as others have, the time is of the essence. And so far, no physical work has actually been done. The City Council has just kind of been discussing climate action for seems like over a year now, and not one physical thing has been done. We still don't have recycling cans downtown, the city pointed out. And so I just want to really ask that the city take this effort extremely seriously and consider hiring a full-time climate resiliency manager. This effort so far has been entirely led by volunteers, which seems to have led to quite a bit of confusion. And staff has had a really difficult time allocating funds and hours for this. So I just ask that the city, maybe in addition to or instead of hiring a consultant as requested, really thinks about this as a long-term effort that needs long-term attention. There are many different items that the city can address now that we consider low-hanging fruit that don't need an expensive consultant, a full-time employee, or tons of work. And there's a large group of volunteers ready and willing to begin this work. And I'm afraid that if work is stalled on this effort anymore, you might lose access to a very large group of volunteers who have consistently showed up week after week to address this topic. And then I want to remind you all that climate mitigation also falls in line with a lot of the other work being done in this community. I, for one, am a really big advocate of environmental justice, and it touches on many of the other issues, homelessness, affordable housing, food security, and emergency preparedness, among other options. So our group actually put together some input for a request for proposal. The city staff is recommending that we hire a consultant, so we had a couple of items that we wanted to suggest be considered in that request for proposal. So that we maintain the work plan timeline. There's a September public workshop is our first major milestone. We ask that we stay in line with that. Help with a refinement of the work plan. And the consultant will draw heavily on the existing volunteer pool for both composition and implementation of the plans and act as a quality control officer for the Italy greenhouse gas emissions study. And then on top of recycling, the Solid Waste Advisory Committee for the county is revising the solid waste plan. And next meeting's on February 26th at 3 p.m. And I invite all city councilors and members of the public to please attend. We will be discussing items like recycling. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. All right, Ian Nichols.
Hello, my name is Ian Nichols. I live on 5th Street over here. I too am a volunteer with the Greenhouse Gas Inventory in the ICLEI program. And yeah, there seems to be just like kind of like some tension or maybe like, some miscommunication between city staff and city council. So I just want to kind of give a couple of suggestions that might help create a more efficient and transparent greenhouse gas inventory. First, I believe we should, like as Chad said, develop a process that allows volunteers to manage and have access to the data compiled during this process. I believe that it will allow for these types of projects to run more efficiently and to be able to actually continue in a timely manner so that we don't fall behind on an issue that is as important as a climate crisis. I believe that we should also start the greenhouse gas inventory as soon as possible. There's a lot that can happen now, from training volunteers to planning how we're going to collect the data to also continuing creating these partnerships with other stakeholders who wish to participate in this inventory. And I feel like if we wait to have the okay to start greenhouse gas inventory and then start all this, there's a lot that we can be doing now and be wasting time. And I believe that in regards to the request for proposal, we should write the RFP in a way that has the consultant work in more of an advisory role rather than the main person gathering and managing the data. It would be more effective to allow the community members to lead the data collection, the volunteer management, and allow the consultant to assist with the things that they're professional, like the planning and maybe more the legally side of things. This is a massive, massive issue, and I believe we should start, doing what we can to mitigate our greenhouse gas levels here in the city, and there's a lot that we can start doing now. Anything I can do to assist with this effort, I'd be more than willing to help with. So thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Bob Freeland.
Bob Freeland, 520 East 10th Street, Port Angeles. Folks, we're at war with nature. Homo sapiens have probably been at war with nature since the last ice age. But we're now losing that war right here in Port Angeles. And Exhibit A is a week ago's Sunday's paper. Below the fold on the front page, 450,000 gallons of sewage dumped into the bay. When this was first proposed, an engineering solution to this problem, I kind of rolled my eyes, thinking, this is not going to work given what climate change has planned for the North Olympic Peninsula. Because of my work on the preparedness plan for the North Olympic Peninsula, I was aware of the kinds of things that were going to happen. But I didn't expect them to happen in my lifetime. I'm 75 years old, or will be this year, and we've already had climate disaster right here in Port Angeles, the beginning of this decade. We're in trouble. Now, I've been coming down here biting ankles of city staff and council since late 2018 and been involved in the process of trying to develop a plan. And then the city council gets from the staff all kinds of problems. I'm puzzled about why they all of a sudden have these problems. Now I can understand with the fusion plan, because that's new to me as well, but not Italy. And they mention suggesting that we look at the Bay Bridge Island and the Olympia plan, but no mention of Port Townsend and Jefferson County. That really puzzles me. Now I know that the staff and the council know Cindy Jane, who has been coordinating the ICLEI for the Port Townsend and Jefferson County. So I think that the council and the staff need to have a come to Jesus meeting and get Cindy Jane, if you can't get her in person, get her there by phone and find out, did they have these problems? If so, how did they resolve them? If they didn't have them, why are we having them?
Thank you. Susan Hilbert.
Hello, my name is Susan Hilbert and I don't live in the city. But Taffy's in the city. And I know you guys have missed me. I've given you a break, but I'm back. So Taffy is doing well. The greenhouse is doing good. We haven't opened yet, but we're going to have lots of fruit trees and bushes, and then we're going to have flowers to beautify Port Angeles, because that's one of our jobs. The treasure trove was doing really good, not making lots of money, but making sure that we're recycling furniture. But she's given us the boot, so we got to find another place. But a side note is, I paid my bill to the city for the treasure trove. Now, we're only open 15 hours a week. And we only use 400 cubic feet of water, which apparently is not very much. And I paid over $220 just for the water, because we have a bigger meter. It was like $200 plus. So it was like $420 I paid. 15 hours a week. That doesn't seem to work real well. So that doesn't support little business at all. We're still doing a lot of community service for people, hundreds of hours trying to keep them busy in the garden and inside and at the treasure trove. We've got men living upstairs in our stopgap program. They come out of the outpatient program and they can move upstairs for up to 6 months. There's 3 of them up there. They're doing outpatient, they're doing community service, they're doing work source, they're getting jobs. We're doing what we can do. I do have a concern though, because one of them is half black and half Mexican, and he says Port Angeles is extremely racist. Okay, not okay. But I'm not seeing anything in the paper that it's not okay either. We're kind of like, let it be all right, and it's not all right. We need to take a stand, and we really need to be fair. No racist, no sexist, no anti-gay, anything. But if you're not educating people, if you're just hanging out, you're not doing anything. People need to see it. We need to promote. Through the city council. That you're a good city, that means you're good. We need to do that. The haters are still out there. Lisa was saying, you know, they're out there. They're stealing stuff. They're taking stuff. They're making the homeless feel bad, and we're doing nothing. Nothing's changing. We're letting the haters just hate on these people. This is the top. It doesn't go any higher than this. You guys are it. If you're letting this happen, it's on your dime. It's not okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And last person signed up is Benji Astrachan.
Hi there, my name is Ben Jostron. I do live in the city. I'm also a volunteer with the City of Port Angeles Planning Commission, the Climate Action Subcommittee. I'm one of the coordinators for the City Volunteer Group. A lot of great stuff has been said this evening. I would second everything that was said by Ms. Cox, Mr. Shad, Mr. Green, and others. I would just also like to say that I'd like to applaud the city staff for actually encouraging the city to allocate the resources that are desperately needed to the climate action plan. So I thank them for that. And I also encourage the city council to ensure, as others have said, that volunteers do really have a strong role in shaping our RFP for the consultant, and that all of the volunteer initiative and the momentum that is building quite literally dozens of people willing to take their free time after work, after full-time jobs, after family commitments, after numerous other volunteer commitments, to come and do this volunteer work, that we take that seriously, we respect that commitment, and we make sure that volunteers have a strong say in how the RFP is created, how the consultant is hired and used, and that we capitalize on the initiative that is already there, and the momentum that is happening. So I'd like to encourage the city council to be wise in the way they move forward with the consultant, and go ahead and hire, but as others have said, primarily use that as a quality control and the broader planning, and to make sure that volunteers are empowered to do the data collection work that they're so committed and ready and willing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, and sorry for saying your last name wrong.
Everyone knows it.
Yeah, but I meant,
Oscar
I actually did. All right, is anyone else interested in speaking during this first public comment period? All right, seeing none, then we will move. Keep doing that, done with that part, so I shouldn't turn off my mic. All right, do we have any late items from staff?
Madam Mayor, we do not have any late items from staff, but I do have a couple of corrections relative to the agenda itself.
Okay.
I do want to note on item G1, the recommendation that you see in your memorandum is to waive the second reading. That should be the recommendation that you see on your agenda as well. There is a time frame required under Port Angeles Municipal Code, and we're trying to meet that time frame. So at this point, we are asking for council to waive the second reading on that item. I would also note that under item I1, tonight the grant acceptance is not part of the consideration. That's something that will come at a future date. But the memorandums of agreement are absolutely on the agenda.
Great, thank you. Any late items from council? All right. Then we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there anyone who wants to pull anything from the consent agenda?
Can you remind me if we have questions about an item, we don't necessarily need to pull it?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
And Madam Mayor, if I could add just a comment to the consent agenda, I would note that the Utility Advisory Committee appointment to the licensed care facility is Laura Dodd, and she is present in the audience this evening. We wanted to acknowledge her. She's representing St. Andrew's Place.
Thank you. So no one wants anything pulled? Okay, I'll read it. A consent agenda for tonight. 1, the expenditure report from January 25th, 2020 to February 7th, 2020 in the amount of $1,940,316.41. Berg and Donian Professional Services Agreement, Utility Advisory Committee appointments, licensed care facility representative, Utility Advisory Committee Industrial Transmission representative, and a tree trimming 2019 final contract acceptance. And I understand there's a question?
So 2 questions. One is, thank you, Laura. I was curious when the licensed care representative for the UAC attends and doesn't attend UAC meetings. And my other question was with the 5th item, tree trimming, is that money part of what qualifies us for the Tree City USA status?
Council, I can answer item 5. Yes, that is funding that does qualify us for that program. And I'd ask Public Works Director to advise us on the Utility Advisory Committee.
So relative to the Utility Advisory Committee, I think that that's something that we want to discuss options moving forward, kind of similar to the last presentation that we had. So we'll probably bring that up at the next meeting.
Thank you. All right, do I have a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda as read. Second.
Any further questions? All right, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda as read, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion passes unanimously. All right, so we'll move on to G1, which is the street vacation petition for the portion of K Street between 9th Street and 8th and 9th Street Alley. And I forgot to put tags on there. Okay. All right, Allison.
Madam Mayor, members of council, I just have a street vacation petition for you. We are looking at a portion of K Street, specifically between 9th Street and the 9th Street Alley. This is the final step of a street vacation petition process. Specifically, it is approval of an ordinance that would vacate an approximately 140-foot by 70-foot area, about 9,800 square feet, of unimproved city right-of-way known as K Street. The valid petition requesting the vacation was submitted in October of 2019 by a single petitioner, John Ralston, and he is representing 100% of the adjacent property owners. The vacation of the city unimproved right-of-way will result in revenue of $10,192 based on a $1.04 per square foot calculation. The amount per square foot was based on a methodology summarized as the following. We did an examination of properties within a 300-foot radius of the petition property. That's the distance that the city currently uses for public noticing notifications, and this is a distance that has historically been used for street vacation petitions. Secondly, a selection of properties within the 300-foot radius that is equivalent in physical characteristics such as slope, access, and land use conditions. So then we look at the values of those properties as they are determined by Fallon County, and then we do a average of those to determine the per square foot calculation. Following the public notice pursuant to RCW requirements, the hearing examiner conducted a public hearing on the petition on November 21st, 2019. The hearing examiner's findings, conclusions, and recommendation to council supporting approval of the vacation are included within the ordinance. And so with approval of this ordinance, The City Council approves and adopts the hearing examiner's findings, conclusions, and recommendation. They are a part of the packet item. So finally, the recommendation by staff tonight is to conduct the first reading of the ordinance, waive the second reading, and adopt the ordinance approving street vacation petition number 19-78 for a $1.04 per square foot valuation based on the value of 3 identified equivalent properties within 300 feet.
Thank you. Let me go ahead and read the ordinance, and then we can have any discussion or questions. An ordinance of the City of Port Angeles, Washington, vacating approximately 9,800 square feet of the K Street unimproved right-of-way between 9th Street and the 8th 9th Street alley in Lot 20, Block 251, Lot 11, Block 252, town site of Port Angeles. Are there any questions or comments?
I move to postpone indefinitely. The land of the city is owned by the public, in my opinion, is invaluable. It is easy to sell land, but impossible to get it back. This is a street, proposed street for a long time. I understand the petitioner's reasoning for wanting it, but I don't understand the...
Point of order, I'll second that for the purpose of discussion, but the point of order is that after you make a motion, unless you stop, and then after there's a second, then you get to speak first.
Okay, I apologize.
So we have a second, so you can continue.
Okay, I apologize. I understand the petitioner's reasoning for wanting it, but I don't understand the city's reason for selling it. I don't see a proposed project. Are we selling it just because a private entity wants it? If the developer has a plan for land use, it would greatly help the argument, convincing me how it benefits the people of Port Angeles.
So just a clarification, my understanding is because of that this is similar to other quasi-judicial matters in which we're not considering the proposed use, simply the vacation. Is that accurate?
Correct. You were considering the record that's been created by the examiner.
Okay, just as a clarification to your question. Great. Anyone else? Lindsay.
I have a number of questions concerning the proposal. So if it's okay, I'll just ask this one by one.
Sure.
Okay. So why don't we have time for a second reading of this?
So there is a 120-day maximum, and we've already exceeded that, and the applicant gave us an additional 30 days from the last time this was placed on the agenda prior to removal. And forgive me, I forget what date that was.
And just so I can understand the slope, so what's the topographic contour intervals on the map that's provided on Council Package G3?
Ooh, I would have to look at our map data set to get that answer to you.
Sorry about that. Then there's 3 comparable properties that are all close. One of them has a value of 7 cents a square foot. The other has a value of 89 cents a square foot, and the other has a value of $2.15 a square foot. Those are all totally separate from each other. If I was looking at that data set, I'd say, where's the consistency? Just taking an average doesn't really get us to a value. How do we work with those? Why are they so different in value?
That is a great question for our Allen County Assessor's Office.
And then in the proposed ordinance, it talks about a vacated portion of an alley. Where is that alley in the proposed vacated space? I mean, I see it as the area between the $2.15 square foot and the 7 cent square foot parcels. I don't see how that connects to an alley.
I'm not sure if I have that answer right away. Where did you read that? I apologize, council member.
It's on the G5, on the very top. Number 2, the vacated portion of the alley shall be consolidated with abutting properties in order to prevent the creation of new parcels of land. That preventing new parcels of land makes sense, but I don't see the alley on the map that's on G3.
Yeah, that might be us.
I feel like when we had this, I don't know why I'm thinking this, if I had asked this question before, but
K Street doesn't go through, and so that improved section we see off 10th is an alley, so it would be a continuation of that. Is that accurate? That it abuts the, so it's unimproved and, you know, improvements relative, but.
I actually believe alley is supposed to be street in that section. I think you read number 2 of the ordinance.
The basic reference street.
Have that
Yeah, that
confirmed.
makes sense at that street. Thank you.
Yes.
And then just a question related to this. You know, 8th Street goes up, you know, from the stop, you know, toward Hamilton. And then what I always thought was an alley is apparently labeled as 9th Street. How did that happen? And why don't we have 9th Street in the spot where 9th Street should be, which is south of that alley?
So unfortunately, that would be a question for whoever platted that, which took place in the late 1800s. So it's, you know, things like this are typical within cities when they're platted, and more specifically, it's my understanding that the folks that looked at this when they platted the city were not from here, which is why you see planned future access points going through topography that there's no way you could ever have right of way where they put that. So it's really easy to plat things on a flat piece of paper in a room, but when you put it in the built environment, it's difficult. So that's probably the best answer we can give you.
And also just answer from someone who's familiar with the neighborhood, these are hills. And so like there are steep hills going up 8th Street from I, steep hills going down I Street, steep hills in a lot of areas.
Yeah, I think that's why it hasn't been developed as a street.
What?
What I'm never getting to though is, you know, this is an area really close to Hamilton. It, you know, at this point we have a third of a mile of space between the 2 north-south streets. Eliminating this access, you know, eliminates the possibility of having even a pedestrian route through a street, even if it's not possible for that to be a road with cars. So I'll continue with my questions. It says in the hearing examiner's report, based on a city staff exhibit report that's not present in the council packet, that land use goal, element goal G3B, to ensure residential land use and development is compatible with the environment of existing uses and residences in the desired areas. And our sub-policy there is to ensure that single-family lots are in reasonable shape and have access provided by a collector arterial, local access street, or alley. The hearing examiner said that this meets that goal. I don't see any explanation for how this meets that, particularly with regard to access to streets, local access streets and alleys.
Would you like me to provide that explanation?
I definitely want an explanation if I'm going to support this.
I will probably be challenged to give you that explanation. I apologize, council members, since I wasn't in attendance of that actual hearing examiner meeting, and so we are relying on the record created. I can do my best to just pull up additional staff reports that actually might reference that particular policy and additional staff findings.
Yeah, so the record includes exhibits, or at least the hearing examiner's findings, conclusions, and recommendation includes exhibits, but those are provided to us.
So it is referencing, the findings and conclusions should be included in the, but it's not the staff report, I think is what you might be referencing.
Right, so for example, page, city staff, this is on page G9, just above paragraph 5. City staff determined that with conditions, the proposed street vacation would meet the city's comprehensive plan's goals and policies listed above. Exhibit 1 staff report, pages 4 to 6. That's a conclusion, but there's no analysis there to tell me how the hearing examiner reached that conclusion. So it's the issue rule conclusion skipping the analysis. And without that analysis, it's hard to know how that conclusion was reached.
I'm not sure how quickly I can find that answer other than just referencing G8, where there is an explanation of just the particular land use goals. So you're just, I believe the one that you just referenced was the G-3B.
Yes.
So you want a further explanation of the staff's determination?
Yeah, I don't see how the conclusion in the hearing examiner was reached, and I don't understand the analysis that got there because there's no analysis provided.
Do you mind if I interject?
Yeah, so those are my questions. I guess I'll finish up. And I was okay having a first reading of this and then getting more questions answered because I obviously have a lot more questions, but I am not comfortable making this decision today without a second reading. So if we have to make a decision today, my decision is going to be no, based upon not having complete information and for the reasons that Councilmember Meyer said, that once we make this decision and give away this public land, we don't get it back and we lose this access route. Now, as folks have pointed out, that is a steep area. It's this forested slope below kind of on the valleys on the west side. The upper area, it is a space though that as we think about safe routes to schools, to Hamilton, how kids might walk in different ways, that having that ability to have public access points away from the main streets, especially when those main streets to my south are a third of a mile apart, I don't think we should give this up without really thinking it through, and I don't think we've done that.
Councilmember French, do you? I also want to remind people, as we continue our discussion, that we do have a motion on the floor and a second. So the discussion, anyway, we do have a motion to permanently table it. So if we want to continue the discussion and vote on that, if there are other motions that want to be made or not, I just want to remind everyone that that's where we are.
So I just want to, just to be clear, your concern is that people from 10th Street won't be able to access to the north. Because just to state the obvious, the conclusion of the packet makes sense to me because the property is bordering a street, so it has access to a street. But you're concerned that the connection between 10th Street and 9th and 8th Street will be permanently potentially severed.
Yes.
The connection does not physically exist, and I would argue cannot physically exist.
For motor vehicles, probably not.
I walked the property today and there's footpaths through it.
Again, my children go to school a block away. I'm familiar with the area. I don't find those objections reasonable. I do think, so I will not be supporting the motion on the table. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Right, then let's vote on the motion on the table, which is to permanently table this recommendation. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, say no.
No. And I want to clarify, I don't think tabling it indefinitely is the right procedure for us to do. I think we should just vote it down.
Thank you. Right. So we, in order to have further discussion, should probably have an additional motion. Would someone like to make one?
I guess I'll make the motion for further discussions. It sounds like there's still a lot of unanswered questions. So the motion is to delay timely. I know that we're looking at a time frame. So if we did, I guess we need to look at what that would be so that we could still try to meet the time frame. But there's a lot of questions unanswered. So my motion is to delay our approval until our questions are answered.
Okay. second?
Second.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I'm able to add additional information if they're ready.
I also want to note that another way to, I think the motion is probably fine the way it is. The other way to do that would just be to not waive the second reading, which is essentially what you suggested. So, Director Burke.
So I have pulled up the staff report, which included the staff analysis that I would say the hearing examiner is referencing. Specific to land use element goal G-3B, our staff analysis was that the application is consistent with the goals, policy, and intent of the land use element by proposing the vacation of unimproved right-of-way that meets the city's minimum urban service requirements and is not prohibiting access for any existing uses in residence.
I'm sorry, I don't know how, if there's not a plan, how is that? If we don't see a plan.
So that is per state statute. They are not required to provide a plan for development because vacations actually might have to occur for no development, just purely access issues.
So I will not be supporting this motion either. I don't have unanswered questions. This is, I think, one of the challenges that we have if we want more density in the city is we have to be, accepting of tough decisions to add density. We're looking at a neighborhood that is not dense, and we're looking at, vacating property that is not used in the hopes, not guarantees, but in the hopes that someone will use it productively. That's exactly what our strategic plan says we should do. I mean, I'm concerned about pedestrian access too. I think those are reasonable concerns. I think I certainly think that geographically we have challenges in the city with steep hills, with creek corridors, with all those things. There's a lot of work we can do to improve pedestrian access in the city. But I think that having some sort of ideological opposition to selling city properties, just to me strikes at the exact opposite of trying to densify the city, which is, like I said, in our strategic plan, and I think, also concurrent with our comprehensive plan. So I would not support the motion on the table, and I would support, passing the ordinance as the staff recommendation is.
All right. Yeah. Anyone else want to speak?
Yeah.
I
just want to agree with Michael on this. I just find this something we need to get done.
Okay. And then I think Latricia first, and then Brett.
I just had a question. The property south of the proposed vacated right-of-way, is that also a right-of-way just south of it that would have connected to that street that comes off of 10th Street?
So I believe Councilmember says it's the area between unimproved 9th Street and improved 10th Street is the area you're referencing?
Yeah, just south of that, the proposed vacated right-of-way.
So just south is the unimproved street right-of-way of 9th Street. That's going in the opposite direction.
Point of clarification, 9th Street is north of the questionable parcel, or the proposed
Thank you.
vacation. Although you're right that is what should be 9th Street.
Say that again?
Are you talking about what looks like a alleyway?
No, well,
I'm talking about this, right,
The road
right there. No, I'm talking about.
that is on K Street, but, adjacent, connecting to 10th.
Should have been 9th Street.
No, K Street is what she's asking about.
Right. Okay. So immediately, if it's in the same area, would be K Street that's intersecting.
So connecting to 10th Street is a street on K Street. She's asking, is that actually officially city right-of-way or a private road? And I'm pretty sure it's city right-of-way.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's forested land there that's still city right away. And so by vacating this proposed right of way, it eliminates that thoroughfare if you ever wanted to connect all the way through to K Street.
Yes.
Because I know, I live in that area also, and unfortunately, the road that I'm on, we get a lot of traffic coming from the school, buzzing by, and I just wonder if vacating that K Street, or even if it was eventually developed, could it eliminate some of that heavy traffic that we see associated with the school? But I also understand promoting growth and development in areas that are needed. This area has been undeveloped for, seems like decades. And we also have a housing issue. So I don't know if that is the overall goal for this property, but if I don't know if, again, we're not here to talk about the uses, just if it meets our goals and stuff of the comprehensive plan. And when I first read it, I really didn't have a lot of issues with it, but I just think today we had a lot of questions, and I just want to make sure that those questions were answered. I appreciate you answering my question about the property just south of the proposed vacated right away. Again, so.
Brendan, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have an ideological difference to this. I just want to make sure, like, is this, I don't, maybe it's my political naivete, but I don't understand why we have to sell it. I understand that he wants it, or the petitioner wants it, but I don't understand why. Do we need the $10,000? And then initially, then the last one, it was estimated $48,000 for the piece of property. So, I mean, if I can buy 98 square feet of property in Port Angeles for $10,000, that's a hell of a deal.
Go ahead.
Just would like to I'm going to make some comments that are just factual comments because we are considering a closed record. So I'm not going to speak to the actual piece of property that is being included in this petition. So we have many areas within the city where, with our topography, we have these, slopes, hills, creek, ravines. The reality is, so as development in the adjacent properties occur, access has to be provided. It is at that time that the access would likely have to be provided by the private developer. So I can confidently say that there are many sections in the community that the city of Port Angeles is not intending to, create the connections due to the difficulty of the terrain. So at that point, the cost of developing to a right-of-way standard would be going to the private developer. I don't know if that helps the conversation at all, but I think that is probably why you might see some, street vacations coming forward, because they can't wait for the city to improve that property, yet they want to provide development to the adjacent properties, or develop the adjacent properties.
Deputy Mayor Carr's next.
I guess I'm kind of with Brendan on this, because I think what's challenging in looking at this is the what if of what is going to happen to this property. And I'm also for sustainable development within our community. We need it, obviously, but it's hard to know when we're just selling a property what is going to happen with that. And the area could be used for any number of things, one of which could be, you know, a new housing complex to provide affordable housing to our community, and the other one could be a large single-story residence or residence for someone else, or nothing. And so I think that is where it's hard to want to vote yes on this without further thought, because there are just a lot of what ifs. I know it's a closed record, and I know that the hearing examiner gave their remarks, but I think it's just the idea that it's not that people had to put it forth a plan, it's that it's just hard to want to sell a piece of property, especially when we do need more pedestrian access, and that open spaces in our community provide a lot of important health benefits and recreational opportunities, even if the city isn't managing them as parks. But there are important things to having open spaces in our community that are going to be lost if this is sold.
So I'm gonna chime in because I haven't had a chance yet. We're taking a chance. I'm gonna say that I support this proposal, not the motion on the table. I understand all the questions. I think that it is a tricky thing to be making a decision about something that is independent of what becomes of the property once we make the decision. I also think I agree with Councilmember French that if we want to increase density, if we want to make it easy for people to develop, then we need to do that. I can understand the concerns about what could become of this property. I also think what Director Brecky mentioned, which is private development of right-of-way where we can't afford it, is something that we should be considering in this. So I'm reluctant to support the motion because it puts the decision off. I'm also reluctant to get to a place where we just say no. I'm not interested in that being the result. So I think we need to think carefully about the decisions that we're making tonight so that we don't end up putting ourselves in a corner and not being able to make the decision. So one of the clarifying questions I have is, and I think my understanding is correct, that if we don't make this decision tonight, then the following meeting is too far after the statute of limitations. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and I think I misspoke what those limitations are. I would have to look at the record. I'm trying to look at RCW too, but we have already received, we reached the limit. We received a 30-day extension from the petitioner. So I would just, I'm under the belief that the next meeting would exceed that time frame.
Okay. So I think just for clarification, because I think it's important for council to understand what, to the extent that you are able to articulate it, why we aren't getting it until now. Because I feel like that's the fundamental issue is if we had a second reading, people would have time to get their questions answered, and we might end up with with a little more ease. We may still end up in the same position, but it goes back to that hurry up because now here we are. And I think, so there could just be a little bit of, to the extent, as I said, that you're able, articulating why it is that we're not in a position of being able to do a second reading if you're able to.
I actually think that is in your hands tonight, and if the council wishes that a second reading is the benefit, I mean, its recommendation is being recommended to you by staff, but I think it's within your, I mean, I can quickly make the argument that we are acting on it and we're moving forward. I would have to just review RCW to see if we need to have the final reading to within that time period. And forgive me, I'm trying to read that right now. But I think that would be the best option that certainly that would potentially lead toward approval if the additional information was gathered. I do just want to just look to my left to make sure City Manager West doesn't have anything else to add.
Mayor and Council, I have quite a bit that just might be helpful, might not, but just want to talk a little bit about process, and hopefully that helps. I think that if you look back in time, what City Council did is recognize the efficiency of a hearings examiner process. And for that reason, a number of council-related decisions were delegated to the hearings examiner system. And when those items are delegated to the hearings examiner system, ultimately council, when you still have action to take on those items, it's done based on the closed record that was created by the hearings examiner itself. And I apologize, I know many council members already know this, but some may not, and I hope that it's helpful. So from the perspective of recognizing that hearings examiner did a diligent job of creating a public record through a public hearing that was presumed to be held impartially, allowing all sides of the issue to comment, weigh in. I'd be concerned if we created new elements of the record. I think that's something that we want to strive not to do this evening. But with the decision in mind, ultimately recognizing both state statute as well as municipal code on the decision-making time frame, we have consistently brought forward items, whether they're quasi-judicial or hearings examiner related, when the record was completed by the hearings examiner, we have always consistently asked for the second reading to be waived on those items.
Point of order. Are the exhibits which were admitted into the record before the council today in our packet, do we have access to the full record for our review right now?
We could certainly potentially provide those. And council, if you would like me to continue, I'm happy to do so.
Go ahead and finish.
So, Madam Mayor, what I was getting to was the potential decisions that council could have before them tonight, with the recognition that ultimately, if there is a requirement to take action within a 120-day period, council could ultimately move forward, accepting the street vacation. Secondly, you could reject the decisions and deny the street vacation. Thirdly, you could send it back to the hearings examiner, or as a fourth item that you may consider that resolves the timing element tonight is to ask the petitioner, who is in the audience this evening, if they would have an objection to an additional time extension, recognizing that we already have asked for one time extension from them, which staff ultimately is accountable for. But I do want to say that those are the four options that staff would probably recommend this evening. But again, I know there's a number of other ways council could probably deal with it.
Right. Does anyone have an opposition to me asking the petitioner an extra 30 days would be acceptable?
I would rather just pass the motion, or deny this motion and then pass this ordinance.
You want to pass the ordinance without having the full record before you?
I don't think you're asking that question in a spirit of fairness and good faith. And I apologize.
I just want clarification. What we're looking at here is, does the city actually own the land underneath, or is it just the right-of-way that was purchased? I mean, because we're asking for a right-of-way vacate. It is, okay. All right, I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, so because the petitioner is in the audience, I will ask if another 30 days would be acceptable for us to consider this at a future meeting. Mr. Ralston, would you be willing to consider an additional 30-day extension in order for us to consider this at our next meeting so that council may have time to have more of their questions answered?
So if I'm a politician, I don't really want to give you a yes or no answer.
Fair enough.
I will tell you that I would not walk through that property with my grandkids because of the steepness. I think your public works director will tell you that there will not ever be a road built through there for vehicular traffic. With regards to the questions about access for bicycles or walking. There is a pathway that is used on L Street. Remember, it goes I, there is no J in the city, so the little drawing you see is K Street. L Street, there is a walkway, it doesn't show on this map, that is very commonly used for kids going back and forth to Hamilton. Then the next street is M, which is paved. So, and with regards to 9th Street is not going to be developed for road vehicular traffic. It's too wet, and it is also on the slope. So that's why it's never been developed. With regards to the costs that Councilman Lindsay, with regards to the numbers that are on this one document, they are all comparable sales of land that's occurred within the past 24 months. So that's, and I think that Allison would confirm that. In fact, I brought that all to the attention of city staff. So I really don't want to give you 30 days. I see no reason why I shouldn't pass this. I know there's a discussion of what's the plan. The plan is irrelevant. That doesn't come into it'd be nice. I could tell you that I'm going to build some housing in that area. I can tell you that. But, if I get struck by a lightning bolt tomorrow, it might not happen. So that's why it's irrelevant by statute. So I'm sorry.
Thank you. All right, so we have a motion on the floor, which is to extend to move this to, if I understood the motion correctly, would be to move this to the next meeting. Yes.
Madam Mayor, I would just like to take the opportunity to offer to print out the full record that has been requested by a council member, and then you can move this item later into your agenda tonight to consider it in full, if that is the desire and wish of the council.
I mean, printing out 20 pages and expecting me to then just have that in front of me and then feel like I have the opportunity to adjust it isn't really acceptable. What Mr. Olson just provided answers my questions. I would like us to do this process better in the future. I'm okay moving forward with it based on what everyone has.
Thank you. All right. So let's deal with the motion on the table, which is to delay. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no.
No.
No. Okay, motion fails. Sorry. Is there an additional motion?
I move to adopt the ordinance approving street vacation petition number 19-78 for $1.04 per square foot valuation based on the value of 3 identified equivalent properties within 300 feet and waive the second reading.
Is there a second?
A second. I move to amend that motion by modifying the ordinance section 3 subpart 2 to replace the word alley with street.
Thank you.
Okay. So.
That needs a second.
Second.
Okay. So we have a motion to adopt the ordinance approving the street vacation and to amend the ordinance in section 3.2 to clarify that the word is street, not alley. Any further questions or discussion?
If the issue is that we can't develop parcels because there's an adjacent right-of-way, that then our code would require the developer to pay to bring that up to a certain development standard. The problem there is with our code, not with having to go through this process. So there's another issue here that underlies it that Director Brekke very appropriately brought forward, and I think there's larger issues here that we need to address. But that goes beyond the scope of this particular decision.
Okay, so let's make a note of that for when we get to our code revisions. All right, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, let's do a revote by hand. Please raise your hand if you are in favor of this motion.
Can I just get a clarification?
Yes.
The motion is to...
The motion is to adopt the ordinance as read.
Oh.
with the exception of changing the word street to alley.
Okay.
Alley to street, sorry.
I'll abstain.
Okay. So all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Right. Anyone opposed? And I guess an abstention. Right. Thank you, the motion passes. All right. That took a long time, but we have a lot of people here who are here for other issues. So I would like to move forward with I-1, the community paramedic MOA approvals, and then maybe consider a very short break.
So, Mayor and Council, thank you very much. So what you have before you for your approval are, and if you indulge me, if I use the term MOAs, it took me a little while to figure out what the plural of the word memorandum is. I thought it might be memorandi or memorandums. Anyways, MOAs, we have 3 of them. In 2019, the City of Port Angeles started a community paramedic program. That program is designed to provide health care in the community for what has been a traditionally underserved population. There are a lot of people who use the 911 system and the local hospital emergency department as their primary access to health care. That is not efficient, it's not effective, it's certainly not cost effective in any way. So it becomes a burden on the 911 system, it becomes a burden on the emergency department. And so what we decided to do was to take a bit of a leap of faith, as we call it, and start a pilot program where we would use a firefighter paramedic from the Port Angeles Fire Department, assign him as a community paramedic, and his duties are to get out into the community and start working with folks who are habitually using the 911 system and the emergency department as their primary access to healthcare, and find ways to refer them to more appropriate avenues to get healthcare. So we, for the first year of this pilot program, we funded this program in-house. We negotiated with the city manager and with this fire department union, and we were able to use one of our firefighter paramedics off the line, took him off for 24-hour shifts, put him onto a regular 40-hour week, which made him available during the day to go out into the community and to deal with folks who needed assistance getting into the healthcare system. Our intent with this program for the first year pilot was to prove that it works. And the deal we made was that if we can prove it works, then we will go out and we will work with our community partners in the healthcare system to have them help us to fund the program into the future. I think that even after the first 6 months, we proved that the program not only worked, it worked well in excess of our wildest dreams. It has been extraordinarily effective. We found that on average, a person who is met by the community paramedic once, we reduce their future use of the 911 system by up to 58%, and we reduce their use of the emergency department by up to 68%. Those are huge numbers. We're talking about people who would frequently call 911 anywhere from 30 to 200 times a year, and we're getting them to use it 0 times after that. Those are incredible numbers. This shows incredible efficacy of the program. Our community partners agree. What we have been doing is working with the primary community partners are Olympic Medical Center, the North Olympic Healthcare Network, and Peninsula Behavioral Health. We've been working with them. We've been basically sharing information with enabling patients to get into their offices and into their doors instead of into the back of police cars and into the back of the emergency department and into the back of ambulances. And so what we've done is we've worked with those community partners, and they have agreed to help us to fund the program through 2020 and beyond. So today in the audience, we have representatives from each of those organizations. We have Dr. Mike Maxwell from the North Olympic Health Network. We have Wendy Sisk, who's the CEO from Peninsula Behavioral Health. And we have John Nutter, who is on the Olympic Medical Center board. They've all agreed to come and to be present here at this meeting to basically show their support, not only their financial support, but also their overall support for the program, which we truly believe is having an amazing positive impact on the health of an entire group of people who traditionally are underserved in this community. And at great risk, I'll also introduce our community paramedic, Daniel Montana, who's sitting in the second row, so you can actually see that they are getting something for their money. And Daniel, if you could plug his ears, because I don't want him to hear this, has been absolutely phenomenal. He has been an incredible community paramedic. He's done an incredible job. He has truly turned around the lives of dozens and dozens of people in this community. He's gotten them, with the help of our partners, to the places where they need to be, and it's been incredibly successful.
Before the chief goes too far, I'd like to point out that I'm the only community paramedic out there, so there's not a lot of people to compare me to, but thank you. Appreciate that.
See, that's why I didn't want him to hear any of this, because he says, anyway, but it's been fantastic. We're very proud of Daniel and what he's done, and I am incredibly thankful. And the reason why I asked them to be here tonight is so I can publicly express my thanks to the hospital, to North Olympic Health Network, and PBH for their support in this endeavor. So what you have before you for your approval are the MOAs, and which are from our community partners pledging their support for 2020 and beyond.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here, and thank you for being great community members and partners with us. This is a great example of how collaboration can make things so much better, and I'm grateful that we're working together on this, so thank you. Right. Questions, comments, or motion?
I move to authorize the city manager to sign and accept the attached MOAs related to funding for the Grand Angeles Fire Department Community Paramedic Program and make minor modifications if necessary.
Second.
Any questions or comments?
I would just like to say thank you to those organizations. Also thank you to the Firefighters Union for allowing this pilot program to go forward. It takes a guy off the ship. And I would also like to recognize that the context of these community organizations supporting this program is really important. Peninsula Gateway Health going through a fairly significant funding disruption over the last year. We very much appreciate the fact that you see value in this and being a partner. Although Medical Center obviously going through a very public disruption and with potentially long-term funding with the federal government. And being able to make a multi-year commitment, same with North Olympic Healthcare Network. It's a really, this is something I've kind of been nagging our fire chief about for probably a year, because really, like he said, we saw the value and the benefit of the community paramedicine program really quickly. And I remember I think it was August, the 6-month report showed that just in direct savings, just in the city, we were saving around $80,000 in that 6 months, let alone those indirect costs that are flowing to all these different places. And I know that the grant that is kind of mentioned in the agenda is through the county, and that's another place where those indirect cost savings are going to happen, and they're going to be ideally partnering with us as well. We appreciate them. So to see this come together is really fulfilling. To see like a long-term sustainable path for the program, I think is going to be a real game changer for our community and for those vulnerable populations that kind of are, unfortunately falling through the cracks. And then, our next challenge is going to be staffing. And I appreciate that nothing's ever perfectly fixed. We are always going to have challenges, but I really think that this is a big gift for us, and I appreciate everyone's support.
I want to piggyback on Councilmember French's comments there, and while I think the humanitarian quality of life improvements for the people that Dan helps is really at the core of what's going on here, I want to speak to the savings of government resources, taxpayer money. This is an example of going upstream and finding that when we do prevention, it's, as they say, worth a pound of cure. Prevention is worth ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Thanks. And so the question is, like, how can we do more of this when there is more need, right? Because often what we do within the city, and I imagine this happens in other agencies, governments, nonprofits, businesses, is we look at the cost. What's the cost of having a paramedic out there doing community paramedicine? And then quantifying the benefit, though, becomes a lot harder. In this case, we've been able to do that, partly because there's direct costs saved by other agencies, by ourselves, by the hospital. And the most expensive place is the ER, right? Maybe it's the jail. I forget, we can argue in the back row there. But about where the most expensive places to spend $940, somebody over there hosts it, and it's definitely not the hotels. But so how do we then say, wait, cost benefit? This is a no-brainer. Like, everyone agrees this makes sense from a cost benefit perspective. So how do we make it work? And that's where, you know, we have to struggle to, like, get these MOUs together, get the resources together to find that. And that's what just isn't making sense, right? Because this is a no-brainer. It saves money, it helps people, and yet it's a challenge to fund it. So I think that gets to some larger issues in how we do this process of governance that we need to address beyond the scope of our conversation here, but important to get upstream. Because in so many areas that we're working, whether it's paramedicine, whether it's housing, whatever it is, going upstream is way more cost effective. And yet, it's way harder for us to do. And that just doesn't make sense.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you again, and thank you for your work. All right, I feel like we have a couple of issues that are probably going to take a little while, so in the interest of the fact that everyone drank some hot chocolate before they came in and sat down, let's take as close to a 5-minute break as possible and be back at 7:56, please. All right, let's go ahead and get started again.
Sorry.
All right, we are going to keep the agenda the way it is, which is to move on. I think the presentation is ready. The climate action planning update and suggested alternatives for the staff.
Madam Mayor and Council, I'm going to kick this item off. I just want to update Council as well as the audience that this item has been a part of the strategic plan since 2019. It's been a top priority item for City Council. And ultimately, what we're here to talk about tonight relative to this item is due to the fact that it is such a high priority for the City Council. And ultimately, our goal this evening is to ensure that we are dedicating adequate resources to climate resiliency planning and making sure that we're doing a good job of that. I think too, we really value some of the input that we heard this evening as far as some of those immediate steps that we can take. Let's make sure that we are moving forward with action-oriented steps that really tackle climate resiliency, recognizing how important it is to City Council, to this community, recognizing how important it is to get it right. So I really want to emphasize that's why we're here this evening. I think too, throughout the process, we've really heard the value of broader regional participation in this, getting participation by other organizations and entities. And I think it's really important to share that as recommended by staff tonight, we feel like we're really opening the door to getting additional partnerships to participate and really ensuring that we can have others participate in this process to ultimately get a consultant on board to really help with those resources and start moving this project forward, as well as some other items associated with this project that are council priorities for implementation. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Director Brecky.
Okay, thank you. So I actually am not going to say much at this point. I'm going to have actually the pleasure and privilege to introduce my new Community Development Manager, Emma Bolin. She's going to lead through some really preliminary research that my staff has done, really looking at those case studies, other examples.
She's been only through the presentation that touches on those. They were a part of the council packet. I just wanted to make sure that they were highlighted for the benefit of the public as well.
Good evening. My name is Emma Boland. I'm the Community Development Manager, and I'm new. And so I just wanted to start off and introduce myself and my background. A life long ago, I was a park ranger at North National Park. And so what do park rangers learn? It's how to relate to their audience, and you're doing that through universal concepts. So tonight's going to be coffee. Coffee, something all adults can actually relate to in this room, probably. So I was thinking about coffee because every day we get a special climate change wake-up call when we drink our coffee. And that's a crop that's seriously at risk due to potential droughts and agricultural product disruption due to climate change. It's something that's so synonymous with the Pacific Northwest, but we're impacted here by something that's grown so far away. It's a great analogy to our challenge. How do we embark on this climate change planning effort? And so when we have this global context, how can we learn how other people are doing it? How can we learn from others? And so that's what I'm going to be briefing you about tonight in just 10 slides on what the city of Bainbridge Island, as well as the city of Olympia and the Jefferson County / Port Townsend climate change planning effort was like in terms of timeline, resource requirements, process, deliverables, how they were organized, so that we can inform our city of Port Angeles process. And so at the end, I'm going to transition back to Director Allison Brecky so that she can touch on our volunteer feedback. We have great volunteers, you've heard from some of them tonight, and recommendations for success. I do ask that you withhold your comments until the end of our presentation. So I'm going to start with Bainbridge Island. In 2016, the kickoff was their climate impact assessment. It was prepared by a consultant, EcoAdapt. I've actually seen them present to one of our local planning professional development networks. And some of the identified actions that they had for real impact was to create a climate change task force, to integrate climate information into all decision-making processes, and to track the application and efficacy of the climate-savvy actions. One of the biggest things was to integrate the climate information into their decision-making processes, and they had a really well-demonstrated rubric on how to do that. So we're going to fast forward a little bit here. In 2017 was when City Council established a Climate Change Advisory Committee. And the ordinance says that it shall consist of qualified scientific experts pursuant to the Growth Management Act, best available science. Which is probably a really good standard to try and select people from, since that is a legislative, a statutory requirement in how we do critical areas planning. So in 2017, the advisory committee recommended that City Council authorize funds so that we could hire a consultant to complete the greenhouse gas inventory. It was estimated it would cost $10,000 to $15,000, and it would take 1 to 3 months. And so a couple years later, they've published their report. It was last year. And so this is an example of a process where the city directed funds and expert knowledge were appropriate. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about City of Olympia. They have a long timeline of climate change planning. They started in 1991. And in 2008, the greenhouse gas emissions inventory was completed by the Department of Public Works using the year 2005 as a baseline. So this report, using a city department, after talking with staff there, I learned that they used a regional greenhouse gas inventory in order to extrapolate some of the data and tailor it for the city. They had to look at some things like air traffic and maritime operations that were specific for the city. They couldn't take from a regional scope. And that required some technical skills and resources that their staff didn't have. And so they did rely on paid interns to do the work, which had some varying skill level. If you get the right intern, I was told from, environmental studies backgrounds, they may, quickly be able to design a process, but not every intern is equipped to do that. And they also noted here that there is a regional Thurston Climate Action Team that was formed in 2009. It's a public-private partnership, and they're currently working on regional planning, and they're using a consultant. And that price tag it's a bit more than what the city of Bainbridge Island had projected for their process. One of the things I really want to highlight out of the Olympia process is their public outreach. And this is a dashboard that is on their website, and it identifies their targets for greenhouse gas emissions reductions. It talks about the regional planning efforts, and it also is a measuring tool against some of the energy conservation and emissions reduction efforts. So there's a lot of value in having a polished public outreach and engagement plan, and that's something that the city should also think about, and our volunteers have been thinking about as well. It may seem like a simple document, but there's a lot of planning that goes into it. For instance, logo development, targeting our progress, branding, graphic identity, information design, user experience, and even thinking about key messages. So, do we execute a public outreach and engagement plan? That's a good question. The joint city of Port Townsend and Jefferson County had some efforts concerning public outreach protocols and how participants represented the efforts in the community. So I'm going to touch on what that process looked like since they're closest to us. It was a joint, or it is a joint climate action committee of the city of Port Townsend and Jefferson County. It was formed in 2008. And I want to emphasize that they also took about 3 years to actually complete a climate action plan that includes their greenhouse gas inventory baseline. The advisory committee does include a broad membership, such as citizens at large, students, Jefferson County Public Health, city council members, and a county commissioner, Kate Dean, Jefferson Transit, Port Townsend Paper Mill, and Jefferson PUD. This was first and foremost a grassroots effort where citizens asked to adopt a target reduction in greenhouse gases. So it was started out that way, and a joint resolution was signed by both legislative boards. And the planning department served on the committee as staff. And especially in the very beginnings of their process, there was a lot of staff effort, especially in the outreach protocols. So the volunteers who worked on the 2005 year baseline inventory, they were required to use city computers at the Department of Public Works just to control some of the data aspects. And I believe now they're working on a periodic update of the inventory. And from looking at another presentation, it looks like they've expended 900 hours of volunteer and staff time towards that effort. And that was a periodic update. Some other things that we heard from people who are involved in that effort is that it really thrives from a really strong advisory board. They really struggled with turnover and leadership at both the county and the city level, with what kind of outreach protocols there would be. And they also struggled with some of the staff time it takes to go to both council and the county commission to recommend new members and do joint resolutions. So there's a bit of facilitation that's involved in that. And so I want to just finish this conversation showing you all of the different approaches that some of our local jurisdictions used. And I want to turn it over to Director Brecky to talk about our volunteer efforts, the feedback that we've received from them, and also some of our recommendations on what's next.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to dive into my notes unless there are any questions that would be relevant at this point in time. Okay, so I just want to also give an effort, a moment to just talk about what staff has done, particularly community development staff has done since the November 6th motions were passed by council. So just 1 week later, the item was added to a planning commission meeting. So November 13th, there was a discussion item that was regarding climate planning. That was when the subcommittee was determined and created. December 11th, so just 1 month later, the first subcommittee meeting met. Since the November 6th motions, there have been 5 subcommittee meetings in total, so 4 in just this year, 2020. I want to just first thank, I don't see any of them in the audience right now, but I don't usually have an opportunity to do this, so I'm going to do it tonight. I want to thank my Planning Commission subcommittee members who bravely stood up to champion this effort, and more importantly, thank the community and volunteers who have been attending each of the subcommittee meetings and providing their very invaluable comments and feedback. From just a touch on the staff process, that also is just a reminder to what is required. Since it is a subcommittee of the Planning Commission, each meeting is advertised for the public to obtain knowledge of the meeting time. Staff is preparing the agenda while talking to the subcommittee chair. The meeting is publicized. There are one-on-ones with the subcommittee chair talking about the agenda, and then ongoing internal staff research and discussion. We're estimating about 70 hours of time, 75 hours of staff time up to this point. Something that my great community development manager said today is that we've really been learning as we go, and we are still also trying to learn from others, which was the point of the presentation tonight. I don't think there is a perfect way of doing this, and I think each city is in jurisdiction is trying to figure out the best way forward for their particular community. Climate planning is a very complex issue with a lot of layers of process, partnered with a lot of strong and passionate emotion. And we have seen that very much in all the meetings. And sometimes they might overlap well, and sometimes they might not overlap that well. But it became very clear at my level, certainly talking with my staff, that because of the priority of this item for the city, we need help. We need more resources. We need an ability to increase the capacity to create a product that will be, I think, worthy of not sitting on a shelf and long-standing for the years to come. So we have a recommendation in front of you. I just want to just take the time to actually talk about the comments that we received last week during our subcommittee meeting. I was overwhelmed with gratitude from the comments that I heard last week. I think it was actually in a moment where I felt that we were seeing eye to eye, and that might not be agreed to some in the audience, but it was clear that we were all having some questions on how to move forward, and that's really frustrating when all you want to do is move forward and move forward quickly. So what we heard from the group, the volunteers, last week is a question on, okay, if we're volunteering for this effort, how do we identify ourselves? How do we identify ourselves to the community? What should our best practices be? If we do hire a consultant, there's no reason to stop the volunteer effort, and that the volunteer efforts can continue. A recommendation that you also heard tonight, that a permanent employee should be dedicated to the climate planning effort at the staff level. Clarity just needed for the volunteer authority on how the survey is undertaken. So who are they contacting within the community? How is ICLEI accessed? How will the city help with that? How will the data be, the quality control, essentially, the data collected? Who's responsible for that? Who's really essentially coordinating the volunteer efforts? That is a question I think that's underlying that hasn't been answered. I think I just identified that it's not possible for a three-member subcommittee to do that. How do volunteers represent this effort consistent with city standards, best practices for maintaining documents, best practices for how documents are, go from the volunteer teams to city staff. So the point there is just there are some, while it is frustrating to see potentially process as the reason for delay, I think it's really important that we talk about that, but also do it in a way that where we have capacity and resources to do that. So that's why the recommendation to get a consultant to do the work is in front of you tonight.
Thank you. All right. Any questions, comments? I'm sure there are many. And or a motion to kick things off. Any of the above? Another raise your hand at once.
All right. So a few big picture thoughts and then getting into the weeds on this. I really appreciate that presentation, thank you. Measuring is not modifying. So it sounds like there's a strong focus to measure our greenhouse gas emissions from Port Angeles. That's not the same as modifying how much greenhouse gas emissions there are. We're not looking at just measuring them once, we're looking at measuring them over time and tracking the trends. So we need to create a structure here that allows us to do that. I know there's an interest in moving fast. I'd also say that if you want to go a long ways, you don't want to run. I was looking to see Dan is still here. I remember in Wilderness First Responder, we learned to take the time to package your patient really well so that you can travel far with them and not have to be messing with it as you go. So we're looking at a long-term process because we want to track trends over time, not just measure things once. And then the other thing I want to share is planning is not acting. As this process unfolded over the course of 2019, a kind of climate action subcommittee turned into climate planning work. And planning gets us to action, at least it gets us to coordinated action, but it's not the same as acting. So the goal here shouldn't be let's come up with a plan. The goal here should be let's execute on that plan so that as we measure our greenhouse gas emissions over time, we are producing less of them and also becoming more resilient in our adaptations to the changes brought on by climate destabilization. And then the final thing I want to share before getting into the weeds is that this changes everything. So there was a comment earlier that, well, the city hasn't done anything. And I would say, well, maybe that might be true about a particular process or a particular course of time, but really everything that we are doing, every decision we make, and the decisions we've already made in this meeting, are part of our climate resiliency actions. So I really agree with the comment in the Bainbridge, the first report, where they said it needs to be integrated, second item, previous item, integrate climate information into all decision-making processes. So, for example, when we get the capital facilities plan later this year, every project in there should have a resiliency section. And we need to address, well, what are the impacts that we're seeing, or do we not anticipate any impacts for this? I commented during the process last year, if we're building infrastructure at sea level, which sea level are we using? Is the sea level now or the sea level in 30 years when we still expect that infrastructure to be in functional use? So this changes everything and it needs to be integrated into everything. So I'm not opposed to the consultant process as recommended by staff, but I also hear the comments made earlier in this meeting and the importance of that RFQ meeting certain criteria. And so after maybe a little bit more discussion, I would definitely be willing to make the motion to pursue that, but with the opportunity for the Planning Commission to weigh in and make sure that that takes the shape that everyone involved in this process has wanted to have so far. I also don't think the recommendation cleans up the lack of clarity that we created on November 6th as City Council. I'm going to refer to that since a we, even though many people here we're not sitting here making an unclear statement at the time. And that is that I do think we need to make some separate motions to remove the Planning Commission subcommittee kind of delegation that we did. And I'm not saying that to say that the Planning Commission can't meet in committees, well, that's their prerogative, but we as a council don't need to direct them to do that, and we should take back that part of those motions. And then the final thing that I'll want to do in this conversation is suggest that we have a joint meeting with the Planning Commission at some point in the first half of this year. And kind of researching and looking over this, that's a recommendation that the Department of Commerce has for effective council Planning Commission cooperation, along with staff, of course. And it's something that I think would help us kind of get this plan off the ground, so to speak.
Thank you. All right, who would like to go next? Anyone? All right, Patricia, I guess.
I guess I also want to encourage in this process that I want more updates on this process with the contractor. Even, what is the status of this process that's going along? I'm going to say that I don't like, and I'm not going to anymore, these last minute decisions that are requested. When we're missing information, I'm not going to jump on board and go along with it. I want to be and keep that information flowing from the committee, from the staff to us. No more coming, out of my personal preferences, no more coming to council or last minute. We have 2 weeks to approve this. Because I don't like to feel rushed, and I want to make sure that what's being decided and what we're talking about, we're all aware of it, and we're not trying to guess what happened in the process that led up to where we're at. So I'd like to have, especially on this climate change process that's very important to a lot of people in our community, also important in establishing boundaries where you can have economic development while protecting your environment and protecting impacts to climate that we value in our community. So I just want to make that statement that I would like to make sure that council is updated consistently on this process.
Thank you.
I'm really excited to see this come forward. I think, as it was said in the presentation, we're a few years behind the curve on this, and we really need to play catch up here. As we saw, Olympia's been doing this since 1991, which is before I was born. So I just want to put that into perspective. So I think it is high time for the city of Port Angeles to really start acting, and I think that this is a really good step in that direction. I think I just want to reiterate Lindsay's point of the importance of tracking our emissions and really having a baseline so that we can continue to see how well we're doing. It's important to have that data so that when we're off of city council and there are new people here, they still have the record and the history to see where we've come from and what we're doing. And I think that is very valuable to have, but I also want to caution us and say that that shouldn't be the end all be all. We also need to keep moving forward on actions that we're taking, such as with code updates, with looking at sustainable development, looking at mitigation planning, recycling bins downtown, whatever the case may be, that our city is making active steps to address what we can in a meaningful way, as well as being able to track our progress. So I'm very excited to see this come forward and see that, that staff is really on board with providing council and the city of Port Angeles and our citizens the best way forward to have this kind of data set to bring us into the 21st century.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm excited to, so I haven't been to a climate action committee for fear that maybe somehow, influencing the commission or something like that. I just stayed clear of it, but I did pass by, and I was really happy to see the community engagement and the filled seats here in the chamber. And I just look forward to, and it can be contentious, like climate change is a contentious issue. There are people who are hard and fast, deny scientific evidence, and there are people who or just really want to see action happen immediately. But to see like people showing up and being engaged in the future of Port Angeles is just really inspiring, and I just want to see that continue. I don't want that to be stifled in any way. So.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Frisch.
Okay, so going back to our previous agenda on last November. I would support the staff recommendation, just to be clear. Going back to that meeting, we had, this was just for context, this was a meeting that we call the Wednesday meeting. And it was a very long meeting, and it went late. Those are not excuses, that's just context. So some of the things that we moved, we made a successful motion to, work with the fusion project, which that's wrapped up in the staff recommendation. That's complex, and I'm sure we've had good discussions about that, but that's just one of the motions we made. I think that was clear and understandable, and we move forward. And the staff recommendation moves that forward, hopefully more. We moved to basically create the, to send the climate action plan to the planning commission and suggest they create a subcommittee and follow the recommendations as listed. That seems to be the one that's in contention or confusing on some level, and that's fine, we can move past that. But I want to just point out, we moved to adopt a climate action planning group's summary of recommendations as stated on page I-2 of the November 6, 2019 council packet. I'm going to read those. So the recommendations are, authorizing greenhouse gas inventory. That's complicated, and that's involved in the recommendation today, that they're saying this might be more work than we realize. And if you look at that Bainbridge Island one, they make the point that, it's really 3 inventories. It's a community, I can't remember how they phrase it, but it's basically a city of Port Angeles government inventory, and then it's a more broad community inventory, and then it's I can't remember the third one, but it's like a consumption inventory. So that's one of the things that's in there. And then here's one, 2B. Integrate climate considerations more explicitly into the city's existing planning efforts. A variety of specific recommendations are offered for consideration by the Planning Commission in Section 7, make changes to comprehensive plan. So I think that the staff is directed to do that. Our city manager is directed to do that. So, when we make changes to the comprehensive plan, that's technically probably not right now, maybe a few years off, or we could do amendments. When we do, you're directed to integrate climate considerations more explicitly into those planning efforts. There's no confusion. That's, I think, we're all fine with. And then 2C, continue to emphasize citywide energy use reduction, including increased use of public transportation, use of electric vehicles, support development of infrastructure, increase biking and walking in the city, move towards 100% clean renewable electrical energy source for the city by 2030, including focus on increasing percentage of local decentralized non-hydro renewable energy use. That one's complicated, it seems. 4, increase energy conservation and energy efficiency in our buildings, and encourage use of renewable energy. I don't think that the city council needs to act on any of those. I think that the city staff has been directed to increase use of public transportation, use of electric vehicles. That one obviously is broad and hard to do. It's not going to be action-oriented. But support development of infrastructure to increase biking and walking in the city. That is something that you can do. That is going to be, when we talk about priorities for capital facilities planning. If that hasn't happened, you have not followed our direction. increase energy conservation and energy efficiency in our buildings. That's something I think that's action oriented. We can do that. There's some low hanging fruit there, I would assume. And then encourage use of renewable energy. That one I get it wrong. So there is some low hanging fruit that we have directed our staff to do, and I think that we could just move on. I don't think that we need more action or anything on that. I don't think there's really any disagreement on staff level on any of that. So, I think it's good to go back and look. We hit some stumbling blocks, it seems like. I think in that meeting, what I remember before I went back and looked at the record was really my focus as a politician was passing that resolution and making that statement from a moral level. And, obviously I see how we failed on some level, to be specific, and, to make action-oriented goals. But we also, at the same time, we did make some action-oriented goals. We can do some stuff. There is some low-hanging fruit in those things that I just read that I think that we could see moving forward when we put together our active solutions plan for this next year. So, like I said, I think that on those difficult ones, I support the staff recommendation. Our next item on the agenda, when we have strategic plan discussion, that's something that Lindsay and I both wanted to put on the agenda. A lot of what I wanted to talk about was climate stuff to put in our strategic plan. I think that I've talked for a long time. If you want to jump, that's fine. I want us to, I think that a draft of a professional climate resiliency plan would be a good idea, and it's a good idea to have a consultant manage that, so we get a professional document that gives us action-oriented, goals that we can do both in the short term and long term. I do think that we already have some low-hanging fruit that we can start thinking right away, and I think that we have a staff that can do that. And I think that we do have some challenges with regards to that inventory. I think that personally, I think that is going to be harder than what we originally thought. And I think that we have already identified some challenges with how we integrate volunteers with regards to public records and things like that. But to me, my priorities are, with that low-hanging fruit, that stuff that we can act on right now. I think we can start. I think that we should ask our city to do, our city staff. Let's see, what agenda are we going to see a report on what we've, how those motions have filtered down into action. And then I would support the consultant for especially the drafting of the climate resiliency plan.
Thank you. Anyone else who has not spoken yet?
Just want to say I do support staff's recommendation, and I realize, I think we all realize, climate change is a huge problem worldwide. Best way to attack it for us is locally, and that's what we're trying to do. And I do realize the government process is a little aggravating for a lot of people, but it does take time. I do support hiring a consultant, as the other cities have done. I think it's a good idea. And we will be discussing this, I feel, a lot further next week in our meeting. And I look forward to that conversation. Everything I've thought about has been mentioned by everyone at one point here or another. I appreciate the discussion, but I do support staff's recommendation.
I wanted to just quickly chime in, and then Lindsay, you can have a turn again. I think it's also one of the things I just want to mention when you mentioned the things that we've directed staff to do. I think another piece that we need to consider when we get to the strategic plan and our other planning is what can we do to facilitate that? And an example of that is by passing the Complete Streets Ordinance. We've already built into our process to be considering bikeability and walkability. So we're making some progress, and I think we need to make sure that we're not just saying what can staff do, but what can we do, both primarily to empower staff to make those changes as we move forward. And I do appreciate the recommendation from staff, and I also appreciate the two other recommendations from Councilmember Sherman Warren to have a joint meeting with the Planning Commission at some point in the next 6 months, not just to have a conversation, and then also to let them know that if they choose to not have a subcommittee, that really should be up to them. And you wanted to speak again.
So before we get back to motions, I want to share a little bit from the resolution and get to the other part of the recommendation that we haven't talked about, which is that the authorization contemplates a joint approach with Collin County if they're willing to jointly participate. So in the resolution that passed on November 6th, two items speak to that, but maybe are not specific enough. One is, be it further resolved that the City Council will work with regional governments, organizations, and businesses in efforts to transition our local economy to carbon neutral by 2030, while ensuring that all efforts are centered in equity and respect for all community members. And be it further resolved that the City of Port Angeles will cooperate and coordinate with other elected officials in the region to ensure our climate mitigation and adaptation efforts are in line with each other. So in seeing this subcommittee process go forward, one of the big questions, especially around measurement, is at what scale, and does it make sense to just do that within the city? And it seemed like a lot of people are saying it makes much more sense to do the ICLEI, and I apologize for the acronym, but the climate inventory or the emissions inventory process with Collin County. So I know Commissioner Johnson's in the audience, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you're available to speak on that, and if the chair would entertain it, I appreciate hearing if the county is able to engage in this in a joint way with the city.
Are you interested in addressing that tonight?
That's a very big, very deep topic. Certainly would be interested if it makes a lot of sense. I mean, there are a lot of things that make sense that we can work together on issues such as this. How we go about that and timing and everything else, I'm not sure. I'm only one commissioner. I keep reminding everyone. So I don't know where the other two commissioners are on the subject. So.
Thank you.
Can I add one thing that I forgot to mention?
Okay.
The difficulties that we've seen, and I mean, I don't want to overstate them. I think that most of us are generally on the same page here, but we saw a dedicated group of volunteers and members of the public that actually deeply cared about an issue, that were intimately involved in a public process. That's awesome. That's an extremely good thing. I will tell you, being on the city council for 2 years, there's so many times where we've had incredibly important things on the agenda that I thought were just like big deals, and nobody came to the mic to care about it, and hardly anybody was in the audience to witness. And so, the fact that we had a dedicated group of volunteers, in spite of it not working out perfectly, is an incredibly valuable thing. And so I really want to say thank you to the people that have come to Mike. I see Bob here, who's come to Mike for probably 2 years asking us to do something about climate change, month after month. And so that is, it's funny being in government where sometimes, you see the public in kind of an adversarial role at times, but, we should be thankful that we've had this struggle. So thank you very much.
Right. Anyone else? I will also entertain a motion at any point.
So I'll make a motion to clear up the subcommittee stuff first. And I know that's not given to the staff recommendation, but I think we should get there. But first, that I think the idea behind the subcommittee that was recommended to the council in the November 6th stuff is something that we should have directed. And this is not to say that the planning commission members cannot themselves choose to work in committees, just that the city council should have directed the formation of a committee within the planning commission. So I move to amend the motions previously adopted on November 6, 2019 to amend the Climate Action Planning Group summary of recommendations as stated on page I-2 of the November 6, 2019 council packet to remove the words, quote, create a subcommittee, end quote, from item 1.
Second. And what I was going to say is, I was looking at our next motion, which said we suggested it create a subcommittee, but I didn't realize that in our actual, this group summary recommendations, it was not a suggestion. So I appreciate that.
And we'll do that one in the next motion.
Thank you.
Right. Any questions?
questions or comments about this particular motion? All right, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Go ahead. I think the motion passes. Can we do a hand count, just so I know for sure? All those in favor? Okay, thank you. Motion passes unanimously.
I'll make another motion. I move to rescind the motion, which was follow recommendation 1 in the council packet and send the climate action plan to the planning commission and suggest they create a subcommittee and follow the recommendations as listed.
So you're sending the whole motion?
It's rescinding the whole motion.
Are you planning on making another motion that
Brings back the
back
resiliency
to the
plan.
plan?
Yes.
Second.
All right. So, any questions, clarification on this one? So it's a corrective action.
Correcting.
To
Gotcha.
not tell the planning commission that they should form a committee, but simply saying, we're gonna send it to the planning commission and let them decide if they want to do that, if that's how they want to handle it.
And to clarify why there's multiple motions here, we had a number of 4-3 votes on these issues at that November 6th meeting. And so then Councilmember Dexter made this additional motion, which passed 7-0. We knew at the time that this motion was redundant with the previous motions, but we wanted a unanimous vote from the council. More for symbolic reasons than for actual policy making, but that's the reason it's the second motion.
Okay, so all those in favor of the motion to, please repeat it.
Rescind the motion, which is in full, follow recommendation 1 of the council packet and send the climate action plan to the planning commission and suggest they create a subcommittee and follow the recommendations as listed.
Right, all those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously.
I'm going to make a third motion on this issue, and that is to refer the resiliency plan recommendations addressing climate change presented November 6, 2019, amended to remove create a subcommittee from item 1 of its executive summary to the planning commission to investigate the resiliency plan recommendations and recommend specific actions to the council.
Second. So this is basically the fixed motion?
Right, so this is putting back in the part that we didn't really want to rescind from the motion we just rescinded, which is
number 2, ABC.
sending that action plan to the planning commission.
It seems complicated. It'll be much more clear when you go back and read the record what's happening. So all those in favor of, are there any questions?
I just wondered how staff had any input on it. Is this making sense? I'm sorry. Static.
It'll work for staff.
Okay.
I have a question.
Is your mic on?
Yeah.
Okay, you must be this.
Oh, I am.
You're
She's got it
static.
on. It's not some static.
Yeah.
So the question is, I mean, in regards to just process, is it normal to go back and make corrections on decisions that were made before and pass a resolution to make changes to past decisions? I mean, wouldn't what you decide today correct what was done already in the past?
I don't know if there's any precedent for it, at least here, but I think certainly it's up to this council if we want to shift the direction, which is what we're doing anyway. So I think it makes sense contextually to address that issue because we're also we are effectively shifting gears with how we're approaching the process anyway. Does that make sense? You don't have to agree with it, I'm just asking if my comments.
I guess it just seems like a lot of work to go back to a November meeting and correct a statement, a motion that was made when you're making a motion that already clarifies it. So I guess I'm just the process thing. It just seems like a lot of work, especially when I wasn't here in November to know what was said and stuff. So I'm basing this a lot on trust, on you guys that were there.
So I can can explain this one further, but first, big picture, we as a council, we don't make actions, we don't direct staff to do anything, we don't set policy, we don't create ordinances or anything unless it's by a majority vote of all of us. As one of our city attorney, insurance attorneys said in a training last year, it was, you don't have any power as an individual council member. You have some rights, like the right to request information, but you don't have any power. The only way that we take legislative action is through a majority vote of this council. And so it's important for us to make motions that are clear and executable by city staff so that we have actually directed the policymaking direction of the city. We can go back to past decisions of the council and change those. So rescinding a motion is something we can do. But I do think it's really important that we use our role as a council as a full council, not as individuals, not trying to say, well, this is what I'd like to see, this is what I'd like to see, but actually use the deliberative process of a 7-member legislative body. And so that's the reason for these motions and getting clear on what we did last November. Now a few months in, realizing effectively the 2 motions we just did was remove the subcommittee part of those motions. This motion that's currently before us is to refer the resiliency plan recommendations addressing climate change, which is a document that was in the November 6th packet, which was prepared by the climate working group throughout 2019. Remove this section, create this statement, create a subcommittee, and then send that to the Planning Commission to investigate it and recommend specific actions back to the council. So that's the motion before us now. It's a motion that arguably we passed back in November, but in the interest of being clear in what we're doing and what we're asking the Planning Commission, I think we should make it again, especially since we just rescinded part of it.
So, can you repeat the motion that we just passed that took out the subcommittee? What is that? Read that again.
Yeah, so that was on the fly motion that we made at the end of this process back November 6th, and that was the one we just rescinded, was follow recommendation 1 in the council packet and send the climate action plan to the Planning Commission and suggest they create a subcommittee and follow the recommendations as listed.
No, I meant the one that we just passed here.
We just passed that, and right now, we have a motion and a second, but we haven't voted. So the motion that we are considering now is to restate that, removing the suggest a subcommittee.
The motion we just passed previous to this was to rescind that entire motion.
Right, so now we're making a new motion to remove the term suggest a subcommittee.
But just as an example, part of what was in that motion was some of the stuff that I read earlier that is action items.
Okay.
So
No.
action items. Yeah, sorry.
Don't confuse it more. Okay, so I guess maybe we need to be a little bit more clear about our motions and what we're actually doing, because I was confused as to what we were doing and why we were going back to changing the motion that had already been made. So I get it now.
Great, okay, good. All right, so all those in favor of the motion to restate the original motion, and I should have written it down, I apologize for not doing that, to send the plan to the Planning Commission, removing the statement to suggest the subcommittee, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, we still have the staff recommendations to address. If anyone would like to make a motion on that, I think we've had quite a bit of discussion about it.
So I move to direct staff to pursue a professional service agreement for a consultant to manage fusion project, ICLEI inventory, consider action items that would emphasize citywide energy use reduction, and draft of a climate resiliency plan for Planning Commission review.
Second. Okay. Any, go ahead.
I'm going to move to refer this motion to the Planning Commission.
Okay, so
we have a new motion to refer this motion that was previously stated, the main motion. There's a second motion to refer the main motion to the planning commission, and is there a second to that?
I just have a question. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, clarifying that?
Yeah, clarifying. So currently, it's in the planning subcommittee?
We just removed the subcommittee.
All right, so it's...
Or they can keep a subcommittee if they want it. We just took away our direction that they should do it that way.
Okay. And so, council person Warren is asking that, I just don't understand.
So his motion is that this motion that was just made to direct staff to pursue a professional services agreement for a consultant to manage Fusion Project, International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives inventory, consider action items that would emphasize citywide energy use reduction, and draft of the climate resiliency plan for the planning commission review. His motion is to send that whole motion to the planning commission for their decision. And so, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, so we can have some discussion on the merits of that motion. So let me restate for clarity. The motion that we are currently considering is the motion to send the main motion to the planning commission. Okay, would you please address that since you made the motion?
So there were a number of comments made earlier today about some of the details of what this professional service agreement should contain. I feel like those are details that would be better dealt with by the planning commission and the folks who've been involved with the resilience planning process in that space, and then they can come back to us with the professional service agreement or whatever level of detail they want to specify before we adopt it.
Any other questions?
So won't a professional service agreement come back to us anyway?
At that dollar amount, yes, it would.
So I will not support your motion.
Can I ask a point of clarification? Do you mean that the draft professional service agreement would come back to us, or before we accept a contract under that agreement, it would come back to us? Because those are
Before we accept a contract.
Well, I think, staff, can you clarify that?
So it would come back for authorization to execute that contract. The contract would be incorporated as part of the council packet. And the council would have the ability to ultimately make the decision on whether that contract's executed.
And just as a point, like, my personal opinion is I don't think council should be involved in any way in drafting professional service agreements. I don't think our planning commission really usually does that, if I'm mistaken.
I agree.
Okay, is there any legal context, just to clarify, for council and or planning commission being involved in the drafting?
I'm just gonna,
Yep.
sorry,
Go
I
ahead.
shouldn't interrupt.
For drafting an RFQ. Right, for coming up with what we're looking for in a professional services agreement.
That's not setting policy.
No.
That is not setting policy.
Fair enough.
That is micromanaging.
Okay, that's your
I
opinion, and I
just-
just
that
want
is
to
my
know a
opinion.
legal opinion. That's, and you're well, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's my fault.
No, generally, the administrative staff would negotiate terms that are intended to carry out the goals established by city council. They would then draft a contract, bring that back to the city council for approval. It is city council's job to approve contracts, but not to draft them. I think that answers the question.
Okay, thank you. I also do think that the motion, the main motion is pretty clear about specifically the main goals of a consultant. I will let you speak to your motion one more time. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, the main motion is not clear on whether that consultant's doing all of it or collaborating with volunteers. it's not clear on whether the consultant is doing the kind of technical greenhouse gas inventory stuff, or, well, really, I mean, drafting a climate resiliency plan for planning commission review. Basically, you know, at what level are they involved here? There's a lot of different ways that they could be involved, and I would like the planning commission to weigh in on that, along with, you know, the people who've been involved in this. On the topic of whether we should direct the scope of an RFP or contract request, if we can. You know, we just did that with the code assessment last year, because we felt like it was an important thing. It was something that we were particularly concerned about. It's the council writes the code. So we said we wanted to actually see that before it went out for consideration. We could do that here. I'm not suggesting we do that here, though. I'm simply suggesting that we have the planning commission weigh in on whether this is the right recommendation before we approve it, and whether they want to make any changes to it.
Okay, that was not my interpretation of your motion, so I'm glad you made that last statement. All right, any further discussion on this particular motion? Go ahead.
So I would say that council wants to provide policy level goals for what we want in that. That's appropriate. I would say that if we really wanted, number one, I don't think we need a planning commission to tell us. I think that we're smart people who have opinions, political opinions on these things, and we could just say them and then agree on what those are. If we wanted to have input in, what we're asking for from a consultant when we are at saying draft a climate resiliency plan. But I also think that we have a year-long record that was good, that gave us recommendations, right? So I don't know why we need more process.
Any other questions or comments? All right, so all those in favor of the secondary motion, which is to send the main motion to the planning commission, please say aye.
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 Okay. That was two from this side?
It was just me.
Just you, okay. All right, all those opposed?
No.
Okay, so motion fails. Now, for consideration of the main motion, which is to direct staff to pursue the professional services agreement for consultant to manage the fusion project. I'm not going to read the whole thing all over again. ICLA inventory, consider action items that would emphasize citywide energy use reduction and the climate resiliency plan for planning commission review. That is the current motion on the table. Any questions or comments about that?
I move to amend the current motion to add at the end, in collaboration with Collin County, if the county is willing to jointly participate, and in collaboration with community volunteers. Second.
Okay. All right, any questions or comments about that? I think that effectively changes the main motion. Whether that's accurate or not, we're gonna go with that tonight.
We have to vote on the amendment.
Okay, we have to vote on the amendment. So, any questions on the amendment?
I mean, do we have to be more specific than the word collaboration?
I believe for this purpose, directing staff to pursue a professional service agreement, the word collaboration is appropriately vague.
Okay. So, all those in favor of the amendment to the main motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, motion passes. And now the main motion, which has been amended to include the collaboration with Collin County. That's the only one, right? Oh, and the volunteers. Okay. So I will read this one more time. Direct staff to pursue a professional services agreement for a consultant to manage Fusion Project, International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, that's ICLA inventory. Consider action items that would emphasize citywide energy use reduction and draft a climate resiliency plan for planning commission review, and to work collaboratively with Collin County and the volunteers. Okay, any questions or comments on that motion?
Just a point of clarification, Collin County, if the county is willing.
If the county is willing, thank you. That language is right there.
The volunteers though are mandated.
Okay. All right. Any questions about that motion? Yes, Latricia.
Sorry about my mic. Don't we already have in here that there's going to be participation with the planning commission?
Yes, but that's a part of the motion from the staff recommendation is to include, for the consultant to bring a draft of a climate resiliency plan for the planning commission review.
And so you're asking now to bring it forward to the planning commission in addition to who else?
No, that's all we're doing. We're saying it's the same motion that we started with, that we're, oh, you might, okay. It's the same motion that we started with, that the work is still going to be done at the planning commission level. The issues we dealt with before were to say they can decide whether or not they want a subcommittee. That's up to them. We don't need to give them that direction. And that this consultant work will come back to the planning commission for review initially. And then if the county is willing, that they would work with us and that we would continue to work with the volunteers. Councilmember Sherman wanted to add more clarification.
Yeah, and just to clarify further, there's 4 things here. There's the fusion project, the ICLEI inventory, action items, and then the climate resiliency plan. Only the 4th one, the climate resiliency plan, is still expressly connected with the planning commission. Those other 3, I mean, if it makes more sense for Public Works to do that, this provides that flexibility. I believe.
Okay. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you all for sitting through that while we work through this. Government at its best because we're having good conversations so that we can come up with an outcome that will lead us in the right direction.
Madam Mayor, I would like to make one more motion.
Okay.
Which I want to see about holding a joint meeting with the planning commission.
Oh, right.
So, I moved back to this up somewhere. I don't think I have it. I just moved to hold a joint meeting of the City Council and the Planning Commission before the beginning of July.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, so we have a motion on the table and a second to hold a joint meeting with the Planning Commission before July.
Yes.
All right, any questions or comments about that? Thoughts? All right, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move to the OAC Services Pre-Engineering Professional Services Agreement. That's J1. And who's going to take that one for service?
Madam Mayor and Council, I'm going to start that one off. I just want to recognize a number of individuals in the room and really appreciate their patience this evening. Certainly Randy Johnson, County Commissioner, as well as Sheriff Benedict, as well as a number of representatives from the Lower Alcohol Police Force, and perhaps Chief Smith can help me recognize others in the room, also recognizing John Better with the Port of Port Angeles. But I do want to just share, since July 16th of 2019, which is when City Council last considered this, we really want to express the appreciation that we've seen in the form of partnership from Clallam County as well as from the Port of Port Angeles in helping us work through what is really an important due diligence step relative to our PennCom facility, the future of it, as well as the future of the Emergency Operations Center and the cooperative approach that we would hope for between Clallam County and the City of Port Angeles. I think too, it's also important to think about the future relative to our fire needs and making sure that relative to housing, we're able to provide sufficient response times to all neighborhoods within the City of Port Angeles. So tonight, we have before you a professional services agreement that really takes a key first step in doing the due diligence on the 1010 building at the Port of Port Angeles, really looking at details, making sure in recognition of the importance of 911 services, in recognition of the importance of the Emergency Operations Center, it couldn't be more important to get this right. And for that reason, it's really important that we build some work off of professional expertise relevant to IT infrastructure, relative to structural integrity of buildings, relative to architecture, and ultimately ensure that we've got predictable details as far as both the construction-related budget and operating budget. So we really appreciate the cooperative approach, the discussions that we've been able to have with the county, with the Port of Port Angeles, and with that, I'd like to turn it over to Chief Smith.
And thank you, Mayor and Council. So what can I add to that? This has been a collaborative process, as Manager West said, and our partners are still in the room because this is very important to them. It's just another step. It's not the final project, but this professional services agreement with OAC is a significant step, and we think we'll gain a lot of information. They'll answer questions going forward. In your packet, you see a proposal with a timeline. We hope to have pre-design done and report back May 1st. And I believe we've, in the RFQ and in the scope of service proposal, we've covered all the possible ground given what we're trying to accomplish. And look forward to any questions to Chief Dubuque and I, or to our partners that are here in the room tonight.
Thank you. All right, are there questions from council?
I apologize if I missed some of the timeline here, but I remember from last summer we were considering a number of possible locations. One of the factors in that conversation was the cost of the different locations. And we as a council discussed kind of the cost of renting versus building new, and kind of discounting future value, stuff like that. And it seems like we're moving forward with the 1010 building, or at least continuing to gather information. So I intend to support this agreement, but I do still want to see the solid financial analysis that it makes more sense to rent than to build our own facility. So if that's not ready, and if now's not the time, I understand that. But before approving the facility in the end, I do want to make sure that it's the cheapest option in terms of the multiple options we have. And, well, I guess I should clarify, most cost-effective option, not necessarily cheapest.
All right, any other questions or comments from council? Well, I appreciate the, again, collaborative effort that has gone into this, and I'm glad that we're at a point where we can explore whether or not that is the right choice. So I would entertain a motion if there aren't any more questions or comments, or even if there are.
I move to authorize the city manager to sign a professional service agreement with OAC Services for pre-engineering for the 1010 building, and to make minor modifications if necessary.
Second.
All right, any further comments or questions? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to authorize the city manager to sign a professional services agreement with OAC Services for pre-engineering for the 1010 building and to make minor modifications if necessary, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much for your patience. Being here tonight. All right, so that brings us back to the discussion about the strategic plan. And there is no packet memo for that because it's a council discussion.
So I've asked to put that along with Lindsay onto the,
Okay.
I don't know if they wanted to talk to it, or I can't.
I'm happy to let council go first. I think it's a good conversation to have before next week, and there should be a lot of value in discussing the scope of that in this meeting this evening.
So I'll say that one of my concerns, so we had a discussion about this in a previous council meeting in which multiple council members brought up, I thought, really good topics to discuss at our work session. What worried me is that 2 hours, it's a long time, not a long time. And I wanted to make sure that I came to that discussion with, and hopefully that to give some context for all other council members to come to that discussion really prepared to have a productive 2 hours. So the two topics that multiple people brought up were homelessness and climate change. We just talked a little bit about climate change, but we also had a citizen come to us with his ideas of what could be changed with regards to climate change into our strategic plan. So we had a couple different things. So I just wanted to
see if we wanted to talk about any ideas for a short amount of time, just so that then we have a week to marinate and then come to the meeting really prepared with, to provide a level of specificity that, you know, the actions, especially section in our strategic plan has. That, you know, saying, I want to do something about homelessness is a far cry from the specificity that the action, I'm not saying any of the council members are saying that, but, so I had some things that I've had some discussions with some of our city staff and some other people, and I just wanted to see if the rest of the council had other ideas that maybe we could talk about before we go into the work session.
Okay, I think that's a good idea so that we use our 2 hours wisely. If I hear you correctly, the idea of this discussion is not to get into weeds, but to highlight some focus areas that we want to discuss with the idea of maybe making some suggested changes. 2 things I want to add to the framing of that conversation is the third big thing that is happening this year that we made a priority is the code, the work on the municipal code, and that's obviously going to take a lot of time, and so we need to consider that as well. And I think just for a frame of reference, as a reminder for new council members, that one of the goals of the strategic plan is to not overburden one department with all of the action items, but to do our best to figure out how we can evenly distribute the workload within that strategic plan. So I just want to mention that as well. So, Mike already had a chance, Lindsay, and then we'll go down here.
I'm going to push back against that last thought a little bit. If a lot of work needs to happen in one department, then we need to put the resources there, rather than say, well, let's make work for this other department because we don't have that many strategic planning things. I mean, different departments work in different ways and are more involved in different aspects of what we do as a city. And so, you know, I don't think it's, well, let's design our proposed projects to fit the organizational structure we have. No, we should design the organizational structure we have to fit what we need to do. It's like biology, it's structure follows function, not the other way around. So in terms of the strategic plan, I am very conscious of where we're at now, which is we created a 2019-2020 strategic plan, and we're a little over halfway through that. There's still a number of items in that, and we want to be conscious of what's practical during this year. At the same time, I do think it makes sense to move forward and start to think about the future. We have not really decided how our plan works in terms of whether we're doing a 2-year plan that revises every single year, so we have a 2-year projection into the future, or are we doing a 2-year plan that ends, and then we do another 2-year plan, have it end, and that. So that's something we need to decide, you know, I think as a council, but I'm happy to take staff advice on that too. I tend to think that revising the 2-year plan every year, pushing 2 years out in the future, helps to give more of a sense of what we're doing, as opposed to getting to, say, November this year and saying, all right, let's design a 2021-2022 strategic plan. I mean, by that point, we've already done the budget. Like, how are we going to do that? So I'm more in favor of saying, let's revise our strategic plan for the next 2 years and do that on a yearly basis, recognizing that we don't get to put a lot of new stuff in the immediate year, 12 months worth of the plan, because that's rolling over from the previous year. But it allows us to project out what are we trying to implement from our comprehensive plan in the next 2-year cycle.
Okay. Who would like to go next? Deputy Mayor.
So, I guess to get into some specifics, I also think it would be really great to be able to think a year out from now. There's a lot of things that have already been accomplished, and I think that's really wonderful and should be highlighted. But especially when we're talking about things like climate planning or homelessness, those are actions that we're going to be taking in the next year, especially around Prop 1. that are going to start relatively soon in the coming year, and to be able to have a strategic plan that reflects some of those laws that have been enacted or ordinances that really are able to be projected out so that we can plan accordingly, and so staff can plan accordingly, I think is important. To be more specific, I think as a new council member, there are some things that might be helpful contextually to get updates on, specifically with the multimodal transportation, and then also community awareness about some things that had deadlines or proposed deadlines by dates that have already passed, such as a mass notification system training. I'm not totally clear on what that in particular is. I can make some assumptions. But things like that, especially when it comes to the wider community, I'm not sure, at least I as a citizen, am not aware that a mass notification system training had happened by December 31st. So some updates on that I think would be great. And then also when going back to multimodal transportation, I think thinking long-term about ways that we are encouraging safe biking, walking, and transit use up until this year and then also 2021, I think is also going to be important as we talk about things, again, like climate planning and things like electric bicycles, or how are we really bringing our city up, and what does that timeline look like? And I know that these are things that I'm sure have already been discussed, but I think that there are just specifics about a lot of these things that are just more challenging of how to know where to find what these are in reference to that might be helpful.
Thank you. Right. Charlie.
Okay. I think we really need to look at homelessness issue, try to find a way to, Mrs. Huff comes in here every week, every meeting, and mentions, they need a safe place, don't feel harassed, out of the weather. I think it's really up to us to help them find a location that's suitable where they feel safe. I think we need to find a way to put that in the plan. Climate planning is totally a huge issue which needs to be thrown in there as well. And like you said, we have code updates. That's going to be a big project. Other than that, it looks like it's all going very well as far as what's been completed and what's been planned. Public safety is always going to be top of our list. I'm looking forward to next week to really dive into how everybody feels about strategic plan. I agree with your idea about looking at this once a year. It's kind of like the budget, we look at it once a year, not every 2 years. I don't know how it's been done in the past. If we look at it once a year, if I'm going to ask that, how's it been in the past?
I think we've pretty consistently hit once a year,
okay,
for the past few years at least. And that's something we'd certainly like to continue to do is take a look at it at least once a year with a more major review every 2 years. And to me, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Being new, I want to keep it as routine as we've been doing without getting out of the ordinary. No, I'm looking forward to next week and the discussions, and I just feel really strongly about trying to find a safe shelter for our unsheltered citizens, because they're just crying for help. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Brendan.
Yeah, let's just go down the line. I would just echo what other council members have said. I think the importance of improving our transportation circulation patterns is big. I think also the interjurisdictional cooperation with other jurisdictions moving forward, especially like when it comes to allocating resources or task forces for the people experiencing homelessness, trying to help that out in a multi-jurisdictional way. I think, the Peninsula, we're out here together, and we're far away from Seattle in a sense, so, that reliance and that collaboration with other jurisdictions is essential. I think that's a big thing that needs to be discussed in the strategic plan. Leveraging the city-owned assets as well. I think, especially, if we have to sell stuff to people, if it's possible to get some kind of, promises of, helping the city developing affordable housing or something like that, I think is especially good, especially if we can leverage city-owned assets in that way. But yeah, thank you.
Okay, all right, anyone else down here want to chime in? I won't chime in briefly because you already started. I like a lot of what I've heard so far, and I would say there probably are some very specific, and it sounds like we've got some recommendations too, but some pretty specific things that we can get started on with regard to low-hanging fruit in the climate, in terms of climate resiliency, that we could probably incorporate. So hopefully we can have some information about those ideas. As an example, I recently met with Director Hunter about a possible grant for electric vehicle infrastructure on city property. And if that's something that's already available, then or something that we could go after, that might be something that we want to include in the strategic plan, so it becomes a part of the work plan, and there's one thing we can at least begin to check off. And Councilmember French, you had something else you wanted to add?
Okay, so I'm going to disagree with a lot of the stuff, even though that's going against the curve. So I think that what we've seen in the past few years is we review the plan every year, but we don't do a major rewrite until every other year. And so I just want to say that our previous motion did not say that we were doing a major rewrite.
Right.
So it kind of sounded like sometimes we were bordering on that with some of what we're talking about. So, staff work plans come out of the strategic plan, and, I want us, when we're doing this, to minimize disruption to all of that work that's ongoing. Reprioritizing does have a cost, even though sometimes it is so important that you need to do it. So, the thing that I'll highlight that Charlie brought up was the data center. I think that that's something that, absolutely we should be talking about at the work session, and we should be doing something about. There are a lot of challenges with regard to that, so I just want to make sure we're aware. Using city property, leveraging city assets is a great idea. Is this something that's going to have to at some point be in a capital facilities plan? I'm not sure, but from I think the city of Olympia's perspective, having the city own and operate it creates a lot of problems that you can avoid if you find community partners that will do it instead. So, I want a data center to happen, and I want to be realistic about what that's going to look like and how we're going to get there. And so, I'm not sure how that's going to happen, but it might involve. I don't know what the action item would look like in our strategic plan. So that's something that just being aware of the surrounding issues, I think, is going to be really important for us. One thing that is in our strategic plan is having community conversations. That's something that we can talk about is do we need to have a town hall on this kind of an issue and hear from our citizens, hear from our homeless, citizens. The other one that I wanted to point out was in Chad's recommendation when he sent us a red line, what he thought were some good, changes in our current strategic plan. The one that I really want to highlight, he added an action of focusing on energy efficient buildings. And his wording was explore programs and incentives to improve energy conservation and efficiency in our buildings. That's something that I would love to see in a strategic plan. And I would also probably say explore or expand programs, because we do have some amount of programs in that. And that leads to our next one, is a lot of this stuff requires funding. And so we can do work to direct staff to come up with a plan on some level for funding, whether it's going to be, how do we use utility tax, whether it's going to be inside of utilities that some of this work happens. So, thinking about those issues of how are we going to fund some of the stuff if we want to get it done, and how does that look like? What is that going to look like on a strategic plan? Because we have a finance department that does really good work. They have a lot of good ideas. I think that's most of what I wanted to say to that. But yeah, I think that Deputy Mayor Carr made a really good point that we already have some stuff in the hopper with regards to housing. That's going to shake out over the next term. That also, by the way, is some amount of a detailed amount of staff time, both on the implementation side and the strategy side. One thing that I've talked about with multiple directors is we don't really have a dedicated staff grant writer. That's something that could provide a lot of value as we talk about constructing a budget for our next upcoming years. It's a position that, it's just like with our community paramedic. That position pays for itself, but it kind of doesn't, right? We are getting direct savings more than what his salary probably, or around the same amount. And now we have community partners in that. A staff grant writer would probably have the same thing, but again, those savings wouldn't come from one spot. It wouldn't all come from the general fund. And the ironic thing is it might cost the general fund a lot more money in matching dollars, but we would see huge benefits. So this is all that's been going on in my head. I just want to communicate that. Originally, I was thinking, I'm going to, get one council member, let's sit down in private talk about this, and it just made a lot more sense to the public. So I see Lindsay had a whole big old list. I don't know if he wanted to highlight anything in particular. But I will also say that as a council member, going through those first few years where we didn't have our own strategic plan was tough, because I didn't, we had a strategic plan that didn't have my fingerprints on it. And then going into the strategic planning session, when we first had the major rewrite, that was a lot. Because the other point that I think I made at the last council meeting is this strategic plan isn't just ours. Staff had a lot of input. We had a facilitator, we had great discussions. I left that day feeling just completely overwhelmed and that I had under-delivered. And then we ended up with a good strategic plan that has done a lot over the last year. But every time we come to an issue, I'm almost thinking, I'm going to talk about that at our next facility, when we have that facilitator for the strategic plan for 2021-22. So I have a lot to say about parking. That's going to be when we have a next strategic plan session, but that's not going to happen at our work session. We're not going to talk about that. Anyway.
Well, I do have a 2-page list of items that I don't want to go over right now, because I think it distracts from the big change. I think we should put in the strategic plan for now, and then figure out how we do the, if we want to do the kind of rolling 2-year plan as opposed to the 2-year block plan. We haven't really gone there. But for now, next week, we're saying, okay, here's our current strategic plan. What needs to change in there for the rest of this year? And I agree with Councilmember McConnell that we have to address people sleeping unsheltered in our community. It comes up over and over and over again. It came up this morning at the Port Angeles Business Association meeting talking about the new plans for the landing. And what I hear is that we as a city are responding by shutting off power at the city pier so people can't charge their cell phones there. Or as we heard at the public comment earlier today, we put a barrier behind parking lots so that people can't come back there and park. So we are doing the move along method of managing people experiencing homelessness. And while we have funds, not enough, but definitely more than we've had before, to kind of go upstream and address affordable housing, that's not the same as addressing people who are sleeping outside tonight, or people who don't have a place to go during the day. And I'm at the point of wanting to make a motion to rent the Vernberg meeting rooms and the kitchen to Taffy for $1 a year because I'm that pissed off. So, like, if we're not gonna move on that this year and like make it so people have a place to go in our community, then, you know, like all the rest of this is just getting overwhelmed by, you know, this clear issue that, you know, we've talked about it before. Like, we're talking about something that takes decades out of people's lives. And we're, you know, wondering when the county is going to figure out how to use its homelessness funds more efficiently, or, you know, when the trickle-down housing that we're hoping to build will eventually provide housing for that person who, you know, can't figure out how to sign a lease. So, like, let's address people sitting in shelter, and let's come up with a plan, and let's make it happen. Now, I'm saying that not because I want to invest in a permanent day use space. I don't. I want us to end homelessness in Clallam County. So I don't want to invest a lot in stopgap measures when what we really need to do is address the root causes. At the same time, if we haven't created some of those stopgap measures, I mean, at this point, the request we're getting is someplace for people to be out of the elements during the day. That's not too much to ask for. If we don't address that, we're never going to get to the bigger issues because we're always going to be spending our resources inefficiently, moving people around, and responding to the concerns about, you know, vagrancy and you know, cleaning up the streets, or whatever that is.
All right, I will just quickly add, and then I think we should probably move on unless someone else wants to chime in who hasn't yet. That while we were in Olympia, we did visit with the City of Olympia staff and got some really great detailed information about a process they just went through around homelessness. And we have the documentation that they gave us. We were asked we offered to not hand it out to all of the council until their council had seen it, because they hadn't seen it yet. I don't know if we have that electronically or not, but I have hard copies for everyone, and I'll put them in your box so that you have them before next Tuesday, so you can look those over just as a point of reference for some of that conversation. Right, anyone else who hasn't chimed in want to say anything? Okay, let's move on.
Madam Mayor, if I
sorry,
could,
yes?
if I could
Yes.
speak to it
Yes.
before we move on, but if
Okay.
Councilmember Sean Warren wants to go first, I'm fine.
I was just going to say, and leading into what Manager West was going to say, that I think the strategic planning process is most valuable when it is the council and director level staff participating as co-equals, because you all know what needs to happen, what can happen in the city, much better than we do. I mean, we're here a few hours a week trying to help in our role. You're here every day for like 12 hours a day, I think. So, like, I want this to be a co-equal process, not staff sitting by and listening to us come up with suggestions that aren't really feasible. Please, let's do it as a cooperative process. And, you know, it's going to be open to the public, of course, but in the past, very few people from the public have shown up.
So Council, I've heard a number of really consistent themes, which I appreciate, because I think that'll really help us achieve the minor modification approach that we're looking at for the strategic plan for the first part of this year, recognizing there's more work to be done in the future. There's more discussion to be had about how we can better address the strategic plan in the future and how we can ensure it rolls and really considers a future look to some upcoming projects. But for now, what we've really consistently heard is a desire to make sure that we're better involving homelessness as well as shelter within the community, ensuring that we are looking more closely at multimodal transportation and ensuring that we are improving aspects relative to climate resiliency within the plan. I think those are some of the predominant ones. I really appreciate what Mayor Dexter shared as far as the magnitude of the municipal code, because that really is an enormous item and we really want to think about that in the plan. My ask of council members would be to really think about what your priorities are relative to different elements that you see today in that strategic plan, because ultimately the most challenging part of this will be recognizing that as we add some of those new things, as we make some of the changes that we're looking at making, other things will have to fall off. And it's going to be really helpful if all of you come to the table knowing what stands as the lowest priority, what stands as a higher priority within that plan to really help provide some guidance to staff at the end of the day, what we can remove to the plan from the plan in order to make the additions pencil out at the end of the day from a resource perspective. So that's what I want to share, and really look forward to the work session next week.
Thank you very much. Let's see if we can quickly get through the item J2, PenCom, JeffCom data merge with the Tyler Tech contract amendment. And then I think we need to go for our policy to public comment before we go to council reports. Before Chief Smith, when you take this, if you can complete the recommendation, it makes making a motion a lot easier. It looks like it got cut off because what we have is authorize the city manager to sign the agreement to amend the current blank. So that would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think I can do that. So what you have in front of you is a proposed amendment to the Tyler Technologies contract with, it's a joint contract with Palm County, City of Port Angeles, and JeffCom 911. And there's also a proposed cost share agreement for this project with JeffCom 911 and the City of Port Angeles. And the recommendation is to authorize the city manager to sign both those agreements. This is what you have in front of you is the culmination of a year plus of technical work by the IT specialist staff of PenCom and JeffCom 911 to put together the information to allow it to be merged. That's the computer-aided dispatch and law enforcement records. So essentially, when we complete this next phase of this process 18 months from now, we'll have regionalized our delivery of 911 services, that we'll have the same information in front of us in either county. We can dispatch for each other. We can provide redundancy. It's a major accomplishment. And the agreed upon cost share is 2/3 PenCom, 1/3 JeffCom 911. That's our negotiated agreement based on our size and workload. The project on the PenCom side is being funded on our 1/10 of 1% sales tax that goes into our capital fund. That's where the money's coming from. So with that, I'm glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council? Then I would entertain a motion. Well, either way, question, comment, entertain a motion. So the motion would be, let me state what I think the memo would say. Authorize the city manager to sign the agreement to amend the current contract with Tyler Tech, and sign the cost sharing agreement between the City of Port Angeles and JeffCom.
That's correct, Mayor. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All right.
So this is part of this larger process of regionalizing the 911 centers. If there's anything we can do as a council to work with JeffCom and assure them that we are excited about moving forward with this process, it seems like a really smart way to manage emergency response here in the North Peninsula. I'm happy to help with that.
Great. Right. So all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. If everyone wants to agree to take 45 seconds for their council report, we can be done in 45 minutes and go to public comment. That would probably be great for getting us out the door before too late. So I'm just going to suggest that, and we'll.
I've got more than 45 seconds.
Okay. Willing to amend it for next time?
Can we do public comment now?
Sure. Okay, let's move on to the second public comment period. Anyone? All right.
I do.
No? Okay, go ahead, please. And just as a reminder to state your name and whether you live in the city or not.
Okay, Eric Phillips, yes, I live in Port Angeles. We'll start this by thanking the deputy mayor for her not bored by 91 comment, making me feel I should have PTSD from Jurassic Park. I want to make a comment to the councilman just a minute ago when we were talking about homelessness, because I am in full agreement that something needs to be done. I don't want Port Angeles to become a NIMBY city. You know, I want to see help for these guys. But at the same time, there's always two sides to the coin. And it's not just to move along. In reference to the parking lot behind Libertyville, which was just cleared out, was not because they were homeless. It was because there was a tent city forming back there. It was because there was trash and needles and there were, I have somebody who will remain nameless, who actually works for the city, was coming to a meeting who refused to park their car anywhere near Papa's building. They parked it safely and walked across. And it's because of the people who were there would get loud and rowdy and make some people uncomfortable. And being a business type of area, this was reported. Not because, and some of those guys had been there 3 or 4 weeks. We let them be. You know, they were just in their car. But when it started getting worse and when it became a tent city and there were more gathering up there is when, like, our board had us talk to the police department, who reacted very great. And I talked to the chief today. I think they did an amazing job with the situation. And there wasn't any major problems that arose from it. But I just wanted to give my comment on the fact that I'm in full, I absolutely agree with you. I want us to help with this problem. But they're not just being moved along because they're homeless. Some of this gets a little bit escalated before that happens. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Keith Vance. I do live within the city limits on 5th Street, and I'm just kind of reiterating on what Eric Phillips said. I'm doing volunteer work for Port Angeles Public Access TV. I also work for security for DSHS and DCYF. I deal with homeless every day. I get to see both sides of that coin. I get to see the administrative and how they feel that it should be done. I also get to see how the homeless feel that those effects happen. It's not an easy thing. It's a very layered, difficult problem. And the reason I feel it's so difficult is because it's always morphing. You always attack it for one angle, and it balloons and creates a bunch of other things you have to deal with. But the one thing I did want to say about that is that a lot of the people who are in that situation are repeat offenders. And I'm not saying that in a negative effect. I'm saying that is doing security down there for almost 2 years at this point, and dealing with them. It's the same 40 people that I have to deal with on a regular basis. Now, to me, that almost leads into with what you guys were talking about with the 911 stuff a little bit earlier. It almost feels like if we had some kind of advocate that was working with these repeat people and getting them to a position where they can be helped would go strides to fixing the problem. It is not a one-fixes-all thing, I realize that. It's going to be a multifaceted thing that you guys are going to have to attack, and I commend you for going after that. That's going to be a rough one. But I do say working at that level and stuff like that, most of those people don't even realize the impact they're having. I'll give you a really quick example and then I'll get off here. We have a trash can in front of the DSHS building, okay? It's got an ashtray in it. And I will clean up around there for hygiene reasons at least 20 to 40 butts every day. Okay, if I don't do that, passerby homeless will pick up the butts and try to smoke them. Massive hygiene, transmission of diseases, you name it. I do that once a day, usually around noon. By the time the cleaning crew comes in on the same day, there's 20 more butts sitting around there. I've cleaned up needles, syringes, you name it. Those are things that are side effects of that lifestyle, those people that are living in those situations, that they don't even realize it's problem to everybody else, because that's something they deal with on an everyday basis. So, back to what I was getting at real quick. The move along thing, as he's saying, it's I don't even see it as an issue, because I see it's the same people over and over again.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Chad, Port Angeles. I just wanted to follow up a little bit. Thank you for good discussion among council and staff about a whole bunch of things. I'm impressed by you all. Thank you. I do want to follow up a little bit, having seen the motion or motions that were passed about moving forward on climate. I'm still not clear how this is going to dovetail with the urgency that a lot of volunteers feel to keep moving forward. It's not clear how long it might take to hire the consultant that now is going to be managing a whole bunch of stuff. You do have a planning commission that's been directed to have some role in this, but it's not clear the extent to which the planning commission, until this consultant comes on board, is going to be able to direct the volunteers. And I think you may find the planning commission feeling some frustration unless there is some direction. So I guess I'm going to ask the staff to try to take into consideration whatever's happened tonight and think about the extent to which you can help direct the planning commission to move forward as efficiently as possible, to try to make use of resources that are out there right now, and hopefully not to frustrate people. I think, having worked myself in county government for 20 years, I'm familiar with process, and I get it if, it might have to wait a couple of months before some things go forward. But I really do hope that there would be some way to keep the momentum. And so, to whatever extent that's possible, I would beg you to think about that. Thanks again. Very, very good movement. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, anyone else? Okay, well, then we'll move on to council reports. Let's start down here with Patricia.
I'll make it short. I really don't have much worth to comment on.
Councilmember French.
Again, real quick, I did attend a chamber luncheon just this last month. We saw a presentation by ecology. It was not necessarily well received by every member. We did have Sherry Kidd with her Phantom City Council membership ask the first question very combatively in a good way, but I think ecology does need to be held accountable, and I think that meeting was a good example of that. I did also attend the Port Angeles Downtown Association with Charlie, and there's a lot of discussions, probably have some more specific notes, but the one big thing that keeps coming up is that complaint about parking enforcement downtown. They specifically like to highlight the Plaza residents. I'm not sure that that's the entirety of the problem. And then I did have the Peninsula Tourism Commission meeting, and I'm excited to see what might come out of, Allison has talked about different ways that we might partner with them more fully, or with the Peninsula Tourism Bureau. But other than that, I do remember the one takeaway from that meeting. They talked about tourism dollars and the offset that they are basically giving to our government budgets and our local taxpayers. That was something like at least $500 a year per taxpayer in tax that's being offset by visitors. So without tourism, we would all, to maintain the level of services that we have, we would be paying a lot more money in taxes. And also, with that thought of also tourism is increasing the value of our community as we increase, like with the Winterice Village Proclamation. That is specifically targeted to try to create a winter tourism economy, but as a result, we're also just making Port Angeles awesome for us. So the value of tourism was great, and there might be a cool state level, I don't know what they call it, conference that our state marketing is putting on there. I guess if I can register anything else, it might be taken too. So it was maybe. So
Councilmember Schwartz.
I don't think I mentioned this before, but Dan Montana, our paramedicine, did a wonderful presentation for the Business Association. I think it was the best presentation ever done by paramedicine ever in the history of the city of Port Angeles. The Resilience Project, which is collaborative hosted by United Way, is doing this collaborative learning academy. I think it'd be amazing if city departments or just a few staff from different departments, maybe the council members, if we go that way, applied and did it. It's about resilience, epigenetics, average childhood experiences, and first neuroscience. And it's an amazingly well taught program helping people to understand what trauma-informed really means and can mean on the ground. So the deadline to apply is March 20th. I'll keep mentioning it until we get there. The National League of Cities recently came out with kind of a report and recommendations. They're calling it Home Rule for the 21st Century. National League of Cities is saying we haven't updated the framework of home rule, which is how states can interfere with local democracy or not interfere with it since 1953. It's time for you to redo that. Let's adapt and allow cities to do what they need to do to address pressing social, environmental issues, economic issues in the 21st century. So that's on National League of Cities website, Home Rule 2020, I think might be part of the URL. And it's worth looking at as we think about how do we solve these problems that often we don't have the power to solve under our current framework of government. Affordable housing bills in the state legislature. The accessory dwelling unit bill is in play at a committee, I believe. Sightline is sponsoring that. There's some concern about preemption, but it's been watered down a lot. And honestly, a lot of what it would do, we are already doing, although I think it would still allow you to connect your accessory dwelling unit without a separate utility connection, which would make a big deal here. I believe the multifamily tax exemption bill is also in play. There's a conflict there relative to kind of what we've said in the legislative agenda, which is that the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance is pushing to not allow multifamily tax exemption to incentivize luxury apartments. Association of Washington Cities is pushing for no change on that part of the 8-year tax exemption. So there's actually a conflict right now between those two organizations. We've said that we prioritize both of their agendas, which puts us kind of in a funny spot. We have this thing that I'm going to call EV fever, electric vehicle fever. It makes us delirious, and we think that we can solve the problems of transportation by just electrifying the existing single occupancy private automobile fleet. And I think that's short-sighted, and it misses a lot of the challenges with an automobile-oriented urban design. And that's because greenhouse gas emissions are not the only problem with the transportation system built for single occupancy automobiles. And really that's because automobiles take up a lot of urban space. When they're moving, they take up a lot of urban space. When they are parked, they take up a lot of urban space. So let's not ignore other things that solve multiple problems, whether it's greenhouse gas emissions or the urban design generally. Let's not ignore trip reduction. Let's not ignore trip linking. Let's not ignore carpooling, car sharing, walking, biking, public transit. I think EV fever is so alluring because it's a purely technocratic solution, but it's still only one solution to one part of the automobile problem. And it also doesn't significantly reduce overall energy use unless it's also coupled with behavioral shifts toward a public multimodal transportation system. So I'm glad we're moving forward on more work around electric vehicle charging stations, et cetera, but we have to not ignore all the other things, often a lot of behavioral things. I mentioned move along mindset, we don't need to go back there. And then I had a great conversation at the break with Dr. Maxwell from the hospital who said that, from North Atlantic Health Network, who said that our paramedicine program isn't benefiting the hospital financially so much as it is benefiting.
Isn't benefiting no so much.
No so much as it's benefiting the insurance companies behind Medicaid contracts And so how do we go even further into that system and try and extract that? So, I don't know, I'd throw up my hands and say Medicare for all, but I'll put that there.
All right, Deputy Mayor Parks.
I'll try to keep it brief, but I went to my first Board of Health meeting today, which was very exciting, and I took a lot of notes. So bear with me. They started the meeting off, or I guess we started the meeting off with something called the Hope Squad, and it was a program, or it is a program at the Crescent School District. And it was one of the most moving presentations I've ever been to, and it is about suicide prevention that students from 4th grade on are participating in, because 4th graders are having their peers tell them that they want to commit suicide, which is horrifying. And it is so empowering and wonderful to see that a school district that I guess a few years ago, I guess over 10 years ago, had a suicide on their campus is taking such a proactive approach to really empowering their students to be able to respond to these issues on a peer level. And they are trained in QPR, Question, Persuade, Refer, which is a NAMI program that I actually was trained in as well back in the day in college. And it is just great to see that that program is doing so well. And one of the things that they mentioned is that students from other schools, including at Port Angeles High School most recently, know about this program that's happening at the Crescent School District, and they are contacting students out there to be able to get the resources that they need and find people in their community, in their peer group, who have these resources and who are easier to talk to than maybe an adult in their life. And so it was just so empowering to see these young students, and they were there and talking about how they got involved, including 2 high school students who had close friends either successfully commit suicide or attempt suicide. So hearing that was extremely moving. We also got an update about COVID-19, one of the coronavirus that there's been a lot of talk about. And one of the things that Dr. Unthank mentioned a number of times is that we should all remain calm, and also that traveling to China is the risk factor, not being a Chinese national or not being a person of Chinese descent, which we would think doesn't need to be said, and yet apparently they've been getting many calls about people worried about their Asian neighbors. So I just wanted to mention it here. We also talked about the opiate epidemic and some of the things happening to that, and I'll bypass a lot of that, but there is litigation that the county is involved in right now around the opioid crisis, and so I thought that was relevant to bring forward today to talk about, and that it's currently, our lawsuit is in Ohio, and that it's kind of on hold right now, and that we'll get progress updates as things go on. But it's important because recently, like I think yesterday, there were some news articles on the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal about these issues going forward, and legislation and litigation going forward, and where it's stalled out at. And so the hope is that there will be a settlement that will positively impact our communities and our county, and that our county will receive some money to help it deal with this crisis, which I know is something that's in our strategic plan. Okay, then we also talked about the syringe exchange program, and one of the things that we were talking about is, well, first we got a lot of statistics about how successful the program is, and that there's been such a huge amount of people who have come into the program and really gained a lot of resources, and there is an overwhelming majority of those folks who have asked for referrals to MAT services and are getting the referrals that they need to become sober. And so a lot of people, especially first-time attendees, are particularly interested in getting off of getting out of addiction, which I thought was really wonderful to hear. Also that communities with syringe exchanges have less syringe litter, contrary to what might be out there. But this is it is a great program. And also that fentanyl has come to our community, and so that now they are offering fentanyl testing kits to make sure that there are less overdoses and that people who are using are able to use safely, and that there are hopefully less responses by EMS services.
Can I interrupt really quick?
Yeah.
So 2018 data that I had gotten from the Department of Health was that the syringe exchange took in 600,000 plus used needles and gave out 400,000 new needles. So that's a net, reduction of hundreds of thousands of needles.
Yeah, it was really impressive to see the statistics. And one of the things that we kind of talked about was like how, there is a community resource right here in Port Angeles that is serving a need in the community and helping, remarkably helping people, and collecting really great data on that. And that sometimes it can be, there's a lot of negativity about syringe litter and people who use opiates, but that this is such a successful program. And how do we tell the community about these successes in a way that also doesn't draw attention to the fact that this is happening? And of course, I don't want people to barrage these folks with negativity, right? And that these are really positive things happening in our community. So I would say that as a first Board of Health meeting, it was a great success, and it was really exciting to be there.
Thank you. Councilmember McCon.
Thank you. Oh, never attended so many meetings in my life, council. PUD a lot. Let's see, on Monday, I attended the Downtown Association meeting with, I always want to call you Richard, I apologize, with Mike. They discussed a 2020 kickoff meeting in March to invite all business owners and the association to get together for a get to know your neighbor. I guess they did that last year and it went very well, and I want to do that again. Chris Fiddler was there, Executive Director of the Waterfront Center. He was talking about the plans of a topping off event at Waterfront Center set for July 1st, which is Canada Day. The event's going to be held at dusk, highlighting the last structural beam being set on the skeleton of the Waterfront Center. Then we're going to have a Canadian flag on one side, USA flag on the other. They're really going to promote that heavily in Canada to try to get some Canadians over here for the event. Also attended the BABA meeting with Dan was there speaking. That was a very good, he's a great guest speaker and engaged with everyone really well. Attended the Chamber of Commerce luncheon last Wednesday. I agree it wasn't as fulfilling as I thought it would be. I wasn't impressed with his responses to questions. He didn't really give definitive answers to any of the questions that I can recall. Attended the charter review on Thursday night. I don't think I saw anyone in here. Those are interesting meetings to go to. They interviewed the commissioners, all three county commissioners. They interviewed prosecuting attorney and as well as Sheriff Benedict. And a lot of the topics they were concerned with, 5-commissioner board again versus a 3-commissioner board. That's something they're going to talk about. The county-wide election versus the district-wide election. One comment made by Randy Johnson was he didn't know if his shoes could last that long going door to door county-wide. He would like to keep it how it is, and I can understand that. Also, my wife, my beautiful wife Melanie, and I met with Steve Burke at Shore Pool Project last Friday. He got me up to speed on what's going on. That's just a great project. I've walked around, saw everything that's going on in there. It's just, I'm really excited to see that. That meeting will be next week. And other than that, we spent a quiet weekend at Lake Quinault. Okay, that's one of the best places to go to if you ever just want to get away. But that was it. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, Councilmember Meyer.
All right. I attended my first Peninsula Area Public Access Board meeting. Dr. Sharon Buck stepped down as a member at large to care for her ailing partner. I didn't really get to know Dr. Buck, but it seemed she was respected and admired by the board. And Dr. Buck leads me to believe that she was a strong contributor to the organization. The Papa board invited Carolyn St. James, a well-known community member, to come and share her knowledge with how to gather resources for grant writing. She's an excellent grant writer with incredible track record. I look forward to seeing what the board can come up with to ensure that people of Port Angeles and the Peninsula can have access to public access to help teach citizens, to equip them to be able to produce content to share their voice. I think it's really important to help grow community outreach. I also got to sit down with Councilmember Shorman? Yeah, Lindsay. Sorry. And Jonathan Bauman to bring me up to speed on the PRTPO, the Peninsula Regional Transportation Planning Organization, which includes one of my things to work regionally. Really excited about the potential there, although I have to dig into the regional transportation plan, the state transportation plan, the state transportation improvement plan. There's a lot of homework to do. I attended the utility advisory committee. We appointed Mary Dexter as the chair and Bill Hankinson as the vice chair. We also adopted the UAC new format, which is great. Finally, I attended Food Not Bombs, which is an all-volunteer movement that recovers food that would otherwise be discarded and shares free vegan and vegetarian meals with hungry people in over 1,000 cities in 65 countries in protest to war, poverty, and the destruction of the environment. I helped wash and peel potatoes. We made potato leek soup, and it was popular with the attendees. I was able to sit down and talk to community members about what's important to them. And then I went for the weekend to Vancouver, BC with my family, which was amazing. They are so much investment going on there, and so much, mixed use development. It's just really amazing to see. So, thank you.
Thank you. I just have a couple quick things. Most of my committee assignments happen after this meeting, but I also am really excited about the shift in the focus of the Utility Advisory Committee. A couple of us attended the MRSC training on the Open Public Meetings Act. And if you weren't able to attend, those are usually because we've registered available to watch, and I would encourage you to take some time to do that if you have it. It was a good one. Got in a little more detail than the presentation we had at council. I also want to quickly just say thank you to Commander Scott Jackson from the Coast Guard Air Station. He had one of his crews fly by the trail and get a picture of the slide that was hard to reach from the ground. So it was kind of fun to be able to call in some neighborly support. And the last piece, which is sort of, I wanted to mention it and I meant to have more information about it, but I don't. But I just want to mention that it is my understanding, and I don't have a bill number in front of me right now, so if you are interested, feel free to follow up with me. There is apparently a bill before the legislature, or working its way through, which would limit the legislature's ability to tax companies like Amazon. And given that every time we need money for things, the state's response is, you can tax your local people more. I would like to pay attention to that one, because I think it does a disservice to our local communities. And that is all I have. So, City Manager.
Council, I'll be fairly brief this evening. I did want to highlight that we have worked towards rescheduling of Jurassic Parliament, and right now we have 2 date options. One is a Thursday, April 30th, which would be a 5 to 7:30 time frame. A second one would be Thursday, May 12th, a 5 to 7:30 time frame. I think our goal was to try to get that rescheduled in April, but we're seeing that even April is a tough one to fit Ann in for. And so if you have a strong preference that you don't want to see that happen on a Thursday night, we'd like to know that in advance.
The 30th is the Progressive Housing Conference in Vancouver.
Thank you.
What was that course again?
Jurassic Parliament with Ann McFarland. It was the one we previously had scheduled, and then we got the snowstorm.
But we did that in Capital Days, right?
Right, but she's gonna come here and work with us, with our other communities and stuff, so that'll be great.
Is that all?
So just a couple other things. We're going to continue to highlight the ongoing census, really encouraging all of our community members to turn in their census cards and census forms. It's really important to us, and if you look back over the years at how we've benefited from the census, you can take a look at the Emerald Coast Opportunity Zone, the partnership that was affected there, building off of the census tracts that we have locally, resulting in 3 different Port Angeles census tracts. Looking at things like how we inform our utility rates and knowing what our demographic is like, looking at our affordability index. Those are things to think about. Really important to watch legislation as it's occurring at the state level and seeing changes being made relative to population, relative to some important measures that you see in the census relative to Port Angeles. So it's important to follow. We just want to encourage everybody to complete their forms. We've also incorporated a mailer in utility bills, and we'll continue to highlight that until we've completed the census. We were going to have for you a draft council meeting schedule for upcoming meetings. That is something that we do want to get out to you, but in looking at it, we've got a number of fixes to it, and we need to probably email that out tomorrow if at all possible. And I believe that is all I have for council this evening.
Excellent, thank you very much. Well, thank you all for your patience. That was a long meeting, but probably did more tonight than we have in the first 3 meetings of the year. So, so I appreciate everyone's patience as we work through this, and I appreciate everyone's discussion, and we're adjourned.